few years ago, there was a series that we covered on the vPub, and it was because of dynamics that were happening at the time. It was a series called Where's the Value? And I would get together with the community and we would do a deep dive and go through all the core ranges and all the available whiskies at that point in time and look at the prices and try and fathom where the best value existed. That is price versus quality ratio. That's the way that we were working back then. Where's the value? And we were forced to do that because we were living through a scenario where prices were becoming more and more expensive and things often felt very out of reach or they were moving out of reach. So we worked together as a community to find the best value. Things are different in 2026. We are living through changed days. It's quite amazing to see. Last year we started this series talking about whiskies coming back to us. And for as long as whiskey continues to come back to us, I'd like to sit with you once every now and again and celebrate whiskies that illustrate that very thing. That's the idea tonight. I'm looking forward to it. As always, I better get something in the glass. And I'll see you all in a second. Hello, whiskey folk. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the vPub. Welcome back to your Thursday night. I hope you're all doing very, very well. I'm doing very well too. It was a wee bit up and down. I wasn't sure how the energy I was going to hold together for this week after a crazy malts festival last weekend. Lots and lots of fun. I'm a wee bit hoarse, just a wee bit dry. Nothing's going on, no infections, no virus, no illness, not feeling poorly or anything. But every time my voice does this now, I get a wee bit nervous. But what a weekend it was. What a week it was. It was terrific to be down at Campbelltown last week. And apologies to everyone for leaving you with the vPub empty. But that means I have to put out a huge thanks to Jim over at Whisky Novice, who stepped into the space and put on a Thursday night vPub to look after you all. To my pal over in Northern Ireland, who I missed. He was travelling to Scotland. We missed each other by one evening in the wee town. We never managed to hook up in Glasgow either, buddy, and I'm very, very grateful for getting the few days break away from whiskey. This is my first dram since Saturday night at the Bon Accord, actually. But I'll raise this in thanks to Jim, Whisky Novice, and to welcome all of you. Hope your Thursday's going well. Cheers, everyone. It's a nice wee dram to get back into things with. How are we all doing? It's nice to see you all. It's nice to have you back again. There have been discussions in the past of me covering a virtual vPub, sorry, an on-location vPub while being down at the Campbelltown Malts Festival. But honestly, the whole thing is just so chaotic and you're kind of just enjoying being around people and focusing on the events and focusing on that I think in order to take down all the gubbins and things in order to try and put together a broadcast on a Thursday night would probably detract quite a lot from the event itself. And I would probably worry that I would do an even worse job than usual of sitting behind the bar and trying to host everything. I think it would be quite an odd thing. So while I'm kind of going away and doing these things very occasionally, in fact, I think it's maybe once a year that an event forces me to miss a vPub if I continue going to Campbelltown Malts Festival. Obviously, if I start going to Fishiel and Spirit of Speyside and other things like that, then you can imagine that would be tricky too. But for balance, and for loads and loads of other reasons, not the least of which is financial and family, it's just one event a year where I'm away on a Thursday night. So thank you for your indulgence. Thank you for letting me have that wee week off yesterday. But we're back tonight. Throughout June, we'll have probably, all things going well, at least 4 vPubs throughout June. And then we'll have at least 1 or 2 into July as well before we look forward to that kind of that break, that taking time away from whiskey throughout July and August, and I'll be back again with you later in August after the summer break. But that means that we've got half a dozen vPubs before the summer break, and the first of which starts tonight. It's a topic which I know seemed to go down quite well last year. I think it's nice when we focus on positivity, or if we take negative topics and try and find a positive spin and all of those types of things. But I suppose we're all very, very aware that in terms of sheer volume sales, whiskey still remains in a little bit of a downturn, along with a global downturn in alcohol, a global downturn in things that are expensive, things that are indulgent, and all of those challenges, all of those headwinds that lots and lots of businesses are seeing, and whiskey is no different. I look at it through a different lens, from a different perspective, and as I'm sure that you do too, because we're not really caring a lot about, the business numbers and how much is sold, how much is exported. We're often just vaguely aware of tariffs and taxes and things like that, and mostly only for directly affected by them. What we're here for, the stuff that we enjoy, is the flavor, is the quality, the enjoyment of the liquid. This is a very, very indulgent, flavor-driven pursuit for us. So we're mostly fixated on what we can have, how much we can enjoy, can we get a hold of it, how much is it going to cost, all of those types of things. And it becomes a game of variety. It becomes a game of chasing and looking for the next. It doesn't need to be the perfect dram, but the next surprising, different, interesting, engaging whiskey. When we get a taste for it, it can truly be a fascinating pursuit. And that's been difficult for years and years and years now, right? Especially the expensive stuff, especially the in-demand stuff, the scarce stuff. But generally speaking, any kind of premium or good quality malt or whiskey or bourbon, it was really, really tough to get our hands on it. There were scrums, there were fights, and the producers took advantage of that demand, of course, and prices went up. Lots of bad actors became involved. Cask prices went crazy for a while. It just became quite uncomfortable a scene for a little while. And we found ourselves grateful for those producers who stayed true to their ethics, that kept integrity front and forward. The ones that looked after us when times were tough for us. We now have to kind of look at how things have changed. Are they still of that mindset? What else has come along to compete with them, and all of that wonderful stuff? I'm actually inspired to do this particular session tonight, and I think you probably have guessed this already, because of a release from one single producer. And I think you probably know who that is. By all means, you can guess that. While I raise this glass to welcome you all and do what we always do and jump into the lounge to welcome some of you beautiful whiskey folk and dedicated barflies. Cheers, everyone, and welcome. I'll scroll back a wee bit and I'll catch some of the orange. I'm looking for orange from any of you guys. If you type Aquavite or at Aquavite, excuse me, it should light up orange. And I should be able to interact with you this evening. If you're watching this on Facebook, thank you so much for catching me there. However, the chat, the discussion that I'm interacting with tonight is always over on YouTube. Andy Hales is here. I think Helen and Andy are both in tonight on different accounts. I noticed a wee bit earlier. I was able to catch up with them. They were very, very hospitable towards us when we were down in Campbelltown last week. And it's wonderful to see them in tonight. Evening, Roy, and welcome back behind the bar. Fantastic to have you, Andy. Hope you're keeping well, fella. You make a fantastic spicy curry. Mike Molasses saying good to be back in the vPub, Roy. By the way, thoroughly enjoyed the multi-part series on Jeff Whisky. So Mike's talking about a crazy thing that Jeff and I did, where we just hooked up a recording and we did a series of questions and Ask Me Anything type format. And Jeff, I don't know how long we recorded for. It was hours. And Jeff has managed to edit it and put it together into a 3-part series on his channel. Mike, I'm glad you're enjoying it, buddy. I need to catch up with it. I need to maybe go in and catch some comments and things like that over on Jeff's channel. But I think it's amongst the most 3 recent videos that's gone out. Fantastic to welcome you in as well, Mike. Jimmy Legg is here. Good to see you, buddy. Never leave us alone with Jim again. He's a madman. What was he up to? Again, that's another thing I've not caught up with. It's on my watch list so that I can listen to it in the car as a kind of podcast style. But I've not got around to catching up with it, Jimmy. I hope you're just kidding, and Jim did a good job of looking after you all. Evening, Roy says, Gino, good to see you, buddy. How's life in Canada? He's saying, nice tan you have there. Lots of sun and fun the past weekend. Have I got a tan this evening? I did end up with a wee bit of sunburn on the top of my head. And I managed to get a game of golf in the last few days as well, as I took a break from whiskey and naively got my head burnt even more. I'm quite surprised that if I look tanned at all, I'm more pink in real life. Dave's Dreamy Drams is saying, good evening, Aquaviti and the Barflies. Celebrating 12 months as a barfly and another 12 months around the sun. Just opened a surprising birthday bottle of mystery malt. Dave, thank you very, very much. And thank you for your 12-month support as a barfly. That means you're keeping everything ad-free, all the content I put out. I never share the ad revenue or do ads with YouTube, with Google, because the barflies take care of it. €1.99, $1.99, £1.99, whatever it is per month, by clicking the join button underneath. In return, you'll get access to your wee barfly loyalty badges there, and lots of channel-themed whiskey-related emoji. Thank you for your support, Dave. And many, many happy returns to you. A surprising birthday bottle of mystery malt. Have a wee guess at it and see how you got on with it. Cheers, Dave. More supporters are Highland Hamish, celebrating being a member for 60 months. Greetings from Inverness. Alfresco Drams tonight. And Danny Hemmington is celebrating being a member for 52 months. In evening, Roy, and you beautiful barflies. Danny and Hamish, thank you both for your support. Frank TG is saying, Agraviti, so good to see the return of your radiant countenance on the vPub. I love the compliments, Frank. Thanks very much. It's so good to see you here, and it's wonderful for you to be buying me a wee dram while I'm here as well. Thanks to you, Frank. Thank you very much, my friend. Tim at Donnerpass Whisky has bought me a wee dram as well to say 4 years ago last Wednesday, we met up at the Bon, thinking of that as they just closed. Felt blessed I was able to meet the owner with you before he passed. That's right, that's Paul McDonough. It's looked after by his son now, Thomas or Tom or Tam, or but the big guy is taking the concept of the Bon to a new home. It's going to be called the Valanche, and it's on Hope Street in Glasgow, but it's going to be probably late summer at the earliest before we see that opening there. Wishing them all the best. And Tim, I do remember welcoming you in Glasgow. It was a pleasure for me, buddy. Justin Wan celebrating being a member of the Barflies for 30 months. Hope Campbelltown was as epic as it always is. It really was, Justin. It was great, great, great fun and good company as well. Rolfie and Sevi looked after me very well. Jimmy Legg is celebrating being a member for 75 months, saying you do have a bit of a tan. You're gorgeous. Thank you, Jimmy. You're gorgeous too, fella. Steve is here. Steve Anderson. Steve Anderson, isn't it? I feel like it's Anderson. Steve, it's nice to have you back, buddy. Celebrating being a member of Barfly. 74 months. Snuck past 6 years when I wasn't looking. Slant you. 6 years. Wow. 72 months, right? Amazing, Steve. Good to see you, buddy. I hope you're keeping well over there. And I think you're Texas-based, aren't you? Brian Cabales is here. The wee gift over the bar here. The chocolate biscuits aren't there, Brian. But I was able to meet Brian and his wife, Florence, in the Bon Accord on Saturday. And what a privilege and a pleasure that was. Here in Skye, super stoked to meet you and the Barflies. It was, Brian. Thank you so much, buddy. Donnerpass Whisky for your dram. And Frank, thank you both for your dram. I also managed to meet Ted and his partner, and Richard and his partner as well at the Bon. They travelled over from the States as well. It was crazy. It was chaos in the Bon Accord on the last night there when I finally arrived on Saturday evening. There were no beers or ales left, nothing at all. There was some Guinness. The last of the Guinness was available. The gantry was completely gutted, almost cleaned out. Everything was half price. But we managed to sneak in a bottle or two of our own, and we managed to hang on until last orders were called at the Bon Accord for the last time. I should clarify, it's not the end of the Bon Accord. That will continue under different ownership. It is a licensed lease, so the Bon Accord will still exist, but the the tenure that built the Bon Accord over the last 20 years is that of the McDonoughs. So that was Paul originally, and now it's been looked after by the team headed up by Thomas at the Bon Accord, and that's going to continue to go, that concept, that warm Glasgow welcome that they were always able to offer out to everyone is going to continue at the Valanche. But the Bon Accord, so don't be surprised if in a couple of weeks' time or a week's time or whenever it is, you go by the Bon Accord and it's open, you think, oh, what's going on here? It's new people that's in. And we believe the people that's taken it over, the people that's behind the Ben Nevis, actually, are Whisky types. So they might look after that gantry as well. Good evening, Roy, says Ben. Whisky with Molly. Good to see you, buddy, and good whisky, folks. Always nice to welcome you in here, my friend. Whisky Weekend Dram Harrow is here saying, good evening, Roy. We moved. Just popped and poured a glass of the Napier to celebrate and really enjoy it. Fantastic, Harrow. Scott Allen in Arizona. Scott, how are you keeping? Good evening, Roy. Looks like Campbelltown was a great time. It really was, buddy. It was fantastic. I hope you and Becky are doing well. Gary Field is saying Jim did a fantastic job last week, didn't he? I hope very much he did. I think Jimmy's just winding me up and he's in here just popping in, Roy Aquaviti. But cheers, my friend. Cheers all, and speak to you soon. I need to catch up with that stream, Jim. I'm looking forward to it, fella. Like I say, it's teed up so I can listen to it in the car. Get Herben is saying, nice to see you, Roy. Fantastic, big guy. Good to see you. And Jean Kelly is saying, hi, Roy. So good to see you back. Jim was great last week. Please let us live vicariously through you for the Bonds finale. It was already quite chaotic, really chaotic. And there were so many people standing in different areas. I just felt like I was spinning and bouncing around all the time. Difficult to keep up with what was happening and things. But it was also a wee bit emotional when that bell rang, when the last orders bell rang at the end of the night. I found myself catching, and just that kind of idea that the only thing that's constant is change, and this is one of these other changes that we just need to accept. But the idea that you can't just arrange to meet somebody in the Bon is I mean, it's not going to disappear, but it's going to be very different, right? Nick Keane is saying, how horrible for you to have so many festivals to choose from. I have some sympathy for this end of the globe where we get one every 2 years. Listen, Whiskey Galore is something that remains on the hit list, Nick. You never know. I just might manage to make it south of the equator to New Zealand for your festival one of these times. Henrik Schmidt is, Henrik, it jumped just as I wanted to read out your chat. Sometimes it happens, buddy. I can see Rolfie Ebhead is in here as well. Fantastic, Rolfie. I hope you've recovered as well. I hope you're doing good. Henrik, I'm going to do my very, very best to look out for your name, but obviously with things moving so fast, I touched the chat and it moved. Where's Roy is in from Norway? Good to see you, buddy. Fair Night Walker is here. Ian Bruce 83, the Falsgraf. Tom, that's Tom Elmer. Fantastic. Good to see you, Tom. Ben is saying, can you promote Linlithgow Whisky Festival on the 15th of August? It started last year and really is a great festival. I'd encourage anyone to come along. There you go. Now, I may be back in time for that, 15th of August. I was also looking at the Fringe Festival in Edinburgh, which is also in August this year as well. But there you go. There's a festival for you right in central Scotland on a perfect train line as well, Linlithgow. Anybody that knows the old lost Linlithgow distillery, it's still standing. St Magdalene, of course. But 15th of August this year might be one that I try and get along to. Are there still tickets available, Ben? Fantastic. Anyway, I'm going to raise a dram to welcome you all. And let's get started. Cheers. Campbelltown was amazing. But last year it took quite a lot out of me. There's quite a lot of tastings stacked. Everything is cast strength. The warehouse tastings are very generous on the pours. So if you're doing tastings from around 11 o'clock in the morning and you're having like half a dozen cast strength drams each tasting, you know, the responsibility is heavy on your shoulders to make sure you keep the consumption at a reasonable level. Problem is, even if you achieve that, you then thrown into a scenario where there's lots of people with backpacks and samples and things that they want to share and pour as well. And even if you managed to battle through that as well, I use the word battle in a very, very soft context, of course, you end up back at your accommodation and you might be sharing that with people who want to share treats and things that they've brought along as well. So it can take a lot out of you over a course of 2 or 3 days. It's not just like a 1 or 2 day festival, right? So last year I came back and I took a huge breakaway and I slowed everything right down. And I was planning to do the same this time, but I think I managed to navigate the festival much better this year. We all did, I think, the group of us that were there together. We chose less tastings, we booked less tastings, we were very strategic about the tastings that we wanted to go to. We were very careful about the whiskies and things that we were indulging in outside of that. So it was a wee bit better. I felt it was better. Put it this way, we left early and I came home to achieve making it along to the Bon Accord for the last ever night on Saturday night. So we came home from the festival a day early this year. Missed out on the What Whisky shenanigans, but we made it back for the last night of the Bon. And when I arrived at the Bon, I was feeling in the mood for whiskey. And when I came back from Campbelltown last year, I can assure you that wasn't the case. So things were much better. And it kind of made me think about doing a vPub session again where we talk about balance and we talk about consumption and things. I know I've done them in the past. They're never the most popular vPubs. They're often the quietest on attendance and the ones that people kind of want to watch a wee bit less, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't do them and we shouldn't consider these things, because I'm not suggesting any of us are out of control or greedy with it or anything like that. We're all adults. We're all doing it, managing our own consumption, our own time. But as this has become more and more embedded for me, more of my daily activity is whiskey focused. It's only increased as time's gone on. I've found myself having to become very, very mindful of consumption and thinking about it all the time and looking at the calendar and not slotting in things because I've got a space, but blocking out spaces to make sure that I've got, you know, decent breaks in between and things like that. So it's not just about, I think when we talk about balance, it's not just about how much we are consuming and keeping account of all of that, but it's how regularly and how often we're consuming it. It's different for everyone. It's not one size fits all. I'm never going to preach to anybody how much they should drink or what days they should drink or anything like that. I think we all are kind of vaguely aware of what is our own personal limits. I'm feeling quite comfortable that I navigated the last week quite well. But as I look ahead at the schedule and the events for the year ahead, I know that I'm going to have to draw on more of that mindfulness going forward. I hope that all of you can too. It really makes a difference when we get the balance right. I think everything is enhanced for everyone. Certainly the enjoyment. This wee sip tonight is tasting much better than I expected it to, and I think it's because the last dram I had was Saturday at the Bon. Toby's here as well. Good to see you. That's Toby Asfalg. I know that you taught me how to pronounce it. Toby, regardless, it's nice to see you, buddy. He's saying hello. Cheers, Roy, and everyone. Kyle Taylor is here. Good to see you. Last drama I had in Scotland was at the Bon in December. Aquavita's Big Mac. Oh, the Macallan. A lovely memory. Cheers, Kyle. I hope you enjoyed it. Andy Hills is saying, hence the request for a cuppa. Absolutely. That's why we asked for a cup of tea when we arrived at yours. You know, all that whiskey available and we're drinking tea. Andy Doris saying, Aquavita Temperance is what drew me to this hobby. And Jimmy Legg is saying, well, there's actually, I know that I'm laughing there, but there's truth in that, because if you're going to mindfully consume a dram of whiskey and you can spend an hour or 2 hours on the sofa with this amount of liquid, which is easy to do. I know a lot of people think that that's crazy, but it is easy to do. Most of the time you're nosing it and taking tiny little sips. It's all flavor, and the flavor hangs around for a long time. Whereas if you're drinking wine or beer or maybe mixed drinks or something like that, it tends to be more of becomes a muscle memory thing. So there is an argument for temperance. My love of whiskey helped me slow down and be much more contemplative and mindful. If I drank as regular as you do, I'd like whiskey much less, says Jimmy Legg. I think there's a lot of truth in that. One size does not fit all, and I think everyone needs to work out, you know, what their limits are. The Watts roast was such good fun. Ferret fettling was an eye-opener. Yeah, I'd love to know what that's about, Helen. I think the only person I've heard it back from is yourself. I heard that I was mentioned. I've no idea of the context whatsoever, and it's a shame I wasn't able to stay down for the day. And good evening, saying good evening, Roy. I hope you had an amazing time down in Campbelltown. It's a fantastic week for whiskey, and I'm pretty good mood. Aberargie, inaugural in the glass, Slancha. Always good to have you in, James. I hope you're keeping well. Ian Bruce is saying, can I add that it's important, and I'm learning about, at the moment, awareness of the food diet we consume along with the whiskey for a healthy balance. Absolutely no doubt. I mean, you feel it. Your body feels it, right? When you've been eating quite well, there's a marked difference in your general attitude and appearance. Dan is here. Good to see you. Last Saturday when you were at the Bon, we had the second Dutch Barfly meeting, and it was magical. Great company and stellar whiskies, too many to try, but none of us drank too much. Fantastic, buddy. Fantastic, Dan. It's always nice to welcome you in here too, and I'm glad you were able to really enjoy the Bon Accord. Danny Evanson, with all this Glasgow chat, I've decided to tuck into a Glasgow 1770 bourbon cask Aquavitae edition. So glad I got 2 of these. Well done to you, Danny. I forgot to check this evening before I went live. I think we're down to the last handful of bottles of those. Once they're gone, they're gone. It's been a fantastic success. It's wonderful to get the feedback, especially face-to-face from people that have tried it and enjoying it so much. But one day in the future, we'll be talking about that fruit bomb and how much of a legend it was for the price. Cheers, Roy. You go to Campbelltown and you still have time for us. Bless you and thank you. Well, Tim, thank you. Thank you for the generous dram and thank you for the kind words. But we have to admit that there was no vPub from me while I was down there. But I'm back immediately afterwards. Cheers, Tim. Thank you. Okay, let's go on with this because I've got some bottles to share with you tonight. Some things to uncork, and talk about how whiskey is changing, right? Whiskey is constantly changing, but for us, I think it's a very positive thing. And I'm going to talk to you about where last year, it was just after the summer break last year, we brought this topic to you, and I talked about things in the terms of concepts. I'm going to kind of do the exact same thing this time around, talk about those concepts, but give you examples of those dynamics, those things that are changing in whiskey and bringing whiskey back to us. For any one of the topics, there's multiple choices of whiskies that could demonstrate that. You could pick quite a few whiskies for any one of them, but I'm going to focus on, again, we talk about consumption, things like that. I've got 5 whiskies here, but we might do a comparison, which will mean that I end up sipping 6 whiskies this evening. I've got 6 clean glasses out. One of them I've already poured into. And that way I know what I'm going to pour this evening. Whether or not I finish those is something else. But that's what I'm going to share with you tonight. And each of the bottles I've selected based on an illustration of one of the concepts of how I hope I'm going to be able to demonstrate to you how whiskey is coming back to us. And I think on the back of what I talked about when we were focused on where the value was, all those, where's the value vPubs that we were doing back in 2019, 2020, 2021, 22, as prices are doing this, especially when the pandemic hit. Prices really started to take off, and content like that became more valuable, I think, to people. It certainly became more valuable to me to do some work studying to see where the best value existed. Now things have changed quite a bit, but price remains a huge part of the discussion. And it's not because I do believe, and I can demonstrate, that prices across whiskey are generally softening, in some areas softening significantly so. And that's actually not that difficult to demonstrate that. But I think we're constantly mindful of it because we maybe have less disposable money. A lot of us had more money to spend, especially during the pandemic, because we weren't traveling. We weren't able to go on holiday and things like that. So we had more money. But now that money's going elsewhere, or we don't have it. And suddenly we have to kind of just be a lot more careful. That means that if producers want to continue selling whiskey to you, they're going to have to bring you much more valuable offers or value-laden offers, and they're going to have to make things a whole lot more attractive. So let's start with that. Let's talk about price competitiveness. And let me give you the first example. It's already what's in the glass. It's what I poured just as we were finishing off the intro music for the vPub tonight. It's in the glass right now. I'm very glad to have it in the glass. And I've loved this. And I'm on my way towards the end of my second bottle of this in 2 years. It's been an easy one to share. It's been an easy one to recommend. And I think the only reason that it doesn't make the permashelf, which unbelievably is still sitting over my shoulder here. It's been sitting here for the last 2 or maybe 3 weeks ago we did the permashelf. It's just kind of been sitting here in the background. These are the 10 bottles that I selected for the permashelf. Kilkerran 12, Springbank 10, Ardnamurchan's AD. We've got Craigellachie 13, Ardbeg 10, Edredar 10, Ben Romac, Cast Strength, and finally Leipzig 10. This could be a contender. The reason that it never made it over there was because of price. When I bought this, the first bottle I purchased, it was an exclusive at the time. I think it was one of those releases that only came from, I don't remember, I'm going back a couple of years now. I think it was the Whisky shop. It's the only place you could buy it originally, £65 going from memory. But the second bottle I bought it less than £60. And that felt a bit more comfortable. This is a 48% ABV 10-year-old. We believe it to be fully natural. But the critical component here is that it was delicious whiskey. But it was also, in my mind, a very successful rebrand. This is Scapa and their 10-year-old. They've still got a decent chunk left in this bottle. And I believe that because of how closely I bought those 2 bottles together, it would have probably been from the same original big batch and big vatting. But now we're about 18 months or 2 years down the road, and we haven't chatted a lot. We haven't talked a lot about Scapa since then. And I think it's been a little bit prohibitive on price. Rolf Isaacson, actually, my friend Rolfie, he bought me and gifted me the 16-year-old Scapa that's sitting over there. And I think that does genuinely remain a little bit out of reach on price. But the 10-year-old has suddenly become a very attractive product. Like I said, it's everywhere today, sub 60. Some places I'm seeing it 52, 53, 54 pounds. 48% ABV from one of the most chased down, hunted malts that was in existence for years. It's a very cult distillery, Scapa. And it was very, very misrepresented by the 40% ABV releases that we had out from them. You might remember Scapa Arcadian series, they were calling themselves Skiren. And was it Glansa? Have I made a mistake there? I think that was the 2 expressions. It's easy to forget because the whiskey was easy to forget. It was very diluted. It relied heavily on the fact that it was going to have to be chill filtered and coloured and all of that stuff. Selling it, like I say, at 40% ABV. Really, really, really a poor representation of what that distillery makes, the malt that it makes. Now, as you can see here, I've been able to go out and already pick up a 3rd bottle. So we're talking about me buying 3 bottles of Scapa 10 in 3 years. So now it is getting dangerously close to that permashelf position, right? What has made me do this? I was already a fan of this when it was £55. But I picked this up locally here at £41. So what we're talking about is there's a huge drive right now to go in one of 2 directions in whiskey. Because of the conditions of the market, people are either going to chase the quality, the integrity. They're going to try and make the whiskey as good as they can make it. They're going to try and get liquid on lips, get people talking about it, and try and increase awareness and sales through quality. Or what they're going to do is they're going to stack it high and sell it cheap. They're going to reduce the ABV down to the minimum it can be, 40% typically. Look at Speyburn and to a lesser extent Knockdo, who's doing it, putting out at 43%. And for house brands there, they've gone that route, and that's what they're chasing. Now, neither way is bad, But if you're a whiskey enthusiast, stripping the whiskey, diluting the whiskey, filtering it, being forced to add colour, this is malt we're talking about. It's quite a precious liquid to the enthusiast, right? I think it is genuinely a very special thing. So doing that to it is, I consider bad. We consider bad. But from a business perspective, I suppose it can be very successful. So if you go into your supermarket today, I don't know where you live, maybe you live in a country where you can't buy whiskey in a supermarket, but imagine the concept of a retailer that's kind of quite happy to do stack them high, sell them cheap, 40% malt whiskies. You know, in the UK, it tends to be a supermarket. And you would look at the shelf and it would be very, very difficult to find things of interest. Going to the bigger supermarkets, you might have a better chance of finding maybe a Lagavulin 8, something like that, or an Ardbeg 10 perhaps, something that might pique your curiosity. If you didn't want peat, you might be very lucky and you'd get a classic laddie or something like that, something that was going to be either fully natural or a bit more close to natural, but it was rare. But I have picked up this exclusive release just 18 months, 2 years ago. This was exclusively released through a single retailer. I picked this up in my local Tesco. Now, the £41 was a club card deal, so one of these loyalty card things. The shelf price is, I think it was genuinely 55 without the club card deal, but it was £14 cheaper at £41. And when you look at that, you say, this is gorgeous liquid. I've been happily pouring this and sharing it, getting through it. I can tell by the wee red dot on the top of this bottle that either a live kind of vPub-based blind challenge in the past, or kind of maybe a blind challenge that I've held here at home or something like that. I can tell that I've been using it for that as well. So I've been excited about the thing and wanting to share it with people. There was a bunch of other whiskies coming down in price. This is special offers, this is deep discounts, but this is also new releases. When we did this at the end of summer last year, I might remember the Pitch Perfect Glen Scotia, brand new core range 12-year-old in the bright blue packaging, all natural. In fact, the first fully age-stated all natural and presented as such core range that we've had from Glen Scotia ever, and it came out at £45. That's recommended retail. Just fantastic. And that sold out very, very quickly, but it's now replenished and it's been back on the shelves for a number of months now. You can just go into any whiskey specialist, you can go online and you can pick up a 12-year-old Glen Scotia, fully natural, Campbelltown whiskey at £45. These are the perfect examples of things that were slipping out of our reach just 3, 4, 5 years ago. Things that were becoming more and more expensive. And all the while the demand is so high, we felt suspicious that maybe the quality was dropping a little too. I don't know how much truth there is in that, but if I finish this now, I'll have a very, very vivid memory of the bottle that's been on the shelf for about a year. With the second bottle of Scapa 10 I've purchased, as I mentioned. I felt 65 was expensive. 55, still a touch expensive, but acceptable. And the reason I say acceptable, because I was contented with the quality of the spirit. Now, I should have probably looked for a code on here. Actually, there's a very easy to read code. If this is the same, no, it's a very different code, very different. So we've got a different batch. So this one is a 2024 batch, and it says on there 2024, 27th of August by the looks of things, whereas this is the 6th of November, 2025. So this is a completely different batch. I should have checked that first. I would have looked silly opening the exact same batch, right? Let's put it in the same glass. Of course, the usual caveats apply. We've got a neck pour here. This bottle has had loads of time on the shelf to breathe. What we've got with Scapa, as I look at this, it might be a lot to do with the levels in the bottle, but the newer one looks a lot darker, actually. Can you see that on the camera? should probably try and put a bit of white paper or something behind. Usually got an envelope kicking around for that very purpose. Let's try this without dropping and smashing things. I don't know if you can see that. No. Let's do it slightly differently. Slightly more risky. Can we see that? If I hold that up, that's pretty useless, isn't it? Take it from me. Despite the fact it's probably got a lot to do with much lower levels in the older bottle, this new one looks a bit darker. Now, why does that matter? Doesn't really matter, because it's Scotch whisky, it's a batch made product, and it's obviously aged in oak casks, and the colour can be very, very inconsistent because of that. If we see slight colour variation from one batch to the next, it's to be celebrated. It means that they're not artificially adjusting the colour of the whisky for batch consistency, which is an excuse that's justifiable in some circles, but for me it's easy to be abused. It's very fruity whisky, very fruit forward, deliciously silky in texture. It's helped hugely by 48% ABV, a slight touch of effervescence. Coastal qualities are absolutely there. That's the way I would define this whisky, but this is the fresh one I've just poured. Absolutely similar, no doubt, but the nose on this, I've got a lovely kind of bright, crushed, fresh apple note. So there's maybe a bit more vibrance from the new bottle. The other one's been open for a long time. Certainly nosing with a wee bit more life. Now, I'm not doing a side-by-side here. I've just poured it into the same glass. I'm going to save the comparison for another bottle a bit later. You might know what that is. I also wasn't aware of getting a kind of dark, waxy wood polish thing on the previous one that seems to be present in this glass. Something kind of moody. Cheers, everyone. Just superb. Superb. I would be misleading you if I told you this was extreme on any axis of the flavor map. This is quite central. If there's any smoke in this, it's undetectable to me. But there is a weight to this. There is a nice robustness to it. It's ever so slightly thick and oily. I'm pleased to note that on this fresh pour, there's a wee bit more vibrance in this. It just sits nice, thick, waxy, oily texture. The mouthfeel is good. So helped by 48% ABV. I'm just going to double check that this new bottle is the same. Very difficult to read, but it is 48. There's a dark honey. There is some dark orangey citrus in there, but for me it's mostly sweet orchard forward. Very fruity, oily. If we're able to walk into our supermarkets in 2026 and pick up Scapa at 48% ABV, fully natural at £41, we could never have predicted that back in 2021, 5 years ago. It would have been impossible. We would have thought that that would not have existed. Firstly, the product didn't exist, and the trajectory of the market and whiskey and where it was going didn't suggest that anything like that could exist. Then we can get into all the soft things, like the fact that it's actually a very, very pretty bottle, you know, with this kind of vortex on the shoulder here. The sailboat is no longer a print anymore. It's actually debossed or embossed, debossed, I think, on the glass. It's just a very straightforward, clean, classy presentation of a bottle of whiskey. And I think if you've ever seen people taking photos of this, it photographs very well too. It's just a nice bottle. It's not so fat that you can't fit them on the shelf easily, and it's certainly a nice height too. So all of the kind of soft things are nice. It comes in a box. Doesn't it? It's important to some people. It's inconsequential to me in 99.9% of the times. But this is just a very reassuring whiskey to have. Honestly, you might have to pay £55 where you are, maybe a wee bit more, I don't know. But in the UK now, they're able to sell this in huge volumes, no doubt, at much, much lower prices. And that is encouraging. These are good quality whiskies, keeping integrity front and forward and bringing the prices. I mean, they can never reach, they'll never get as cheap as Speyburn might one day get to because it's at 40% ABV. But right now, the prices that I saw on the shelves of Speyburns are priced alongside this, and that's a no-brainer. You've got a natural whiskey versus one that is not. We know which one we're going to pick up, right? Jimmy Legs, sarcasm swings in right on point. Thank you, big guy. Oh, if it photographs well, I'll have 2 bottles. It really does, though. If you look at some of the photographs online, the Instagram pictures and things like that, they had dram face pictures. It's very, very easy to make a wee bottle of Scapa look nice. Dominic Fife is here. Good to see you, buddy. Saying the box says non-chill filter, but the website admits C150A. A pity if it's 100% bourbon matured and would naturally be at a lighter gold. Delicious all the same. I have to say that those 2 batches have not done a very good job of matching the colour, if that's the case. I remember having a discussion about this at the time, and I think that some people had checked on the website to find that information, Dominic. I have to think back to I don't even remember which vPub that we first shared the Scapa 10. But I think at the time on Whiskey Base, they were suggesting that it was natural. Gary Field is saying, picked up the Scapa 10 for 40 quid on Amazon. So there you go. If you're not near a supermarket, not near a Tesco that's got the club card deal on, it looks like Big Bezos's House of Blue is doing it for you. Andy Hills is saying, early start on the buses tomorrow, so off to bed. Good night from the 2 of us. We'll catch up in the replay and see you in the lock-in on Sunday. It's a shame you're working so early, guys. But fantastic to welcome you in. Let us know how you got on in the quiz. Jesper is saying, Aquavita, I went up to Orkney a couple of years ago. Highland Park was getting renovated, so I did a tour of Scapa and was pleasantly surprised with several of their drams. Well worth a visit. I've got friends very close to me. I'm going to mention them a wee bit later because I'll actually be drinking one of his whiskies in a minute. But he's just back from Orkney as well, and he was completely blown away by Scapa. They thought it was gorgeous, and I think it was their favourite whiskey of the trip as well. Donner Pass Whiskey saying, we'll keep an eye out for the 10. The Scapa 16 I got was a very good price, but it was disappointing. Everyone says the 10 is much better. The 10 is better for me. It's more vibrant. It's fuller. I don't know how they've managed to make that 16 so kind of insipid and soft. It's at the perfect age statement for it to be perfect. Let us know how you got on if you do pick it up, Tim. Falsgraph is saying, don't know the badge, but the bottle I see online in Germany is not coloured. Well, that's interesting. That's interesting. So there is a bit of confusion about there. Same as the confusion we had the first time on the vPub. Is it coloured? Is it not? But if they're admitting on the website that they use E150A, I think that's pretty conclusive. Justin Wan is saying, Pernod Ricard isn't the best at keeping caramel off its whiskey, even when it's 48% and non-chill filtered. Justin, I would agree with you on that. Whiskey me away. Good to see you, Amish. I've tried a lovely old version of Scapa at Diggers. Listen, one of the things that made Scapa such a legend and one of these kind of sought after malts was the fact that independent bottlers were able to release gold from that distillery. Wonderfully interesting product. I would put it in the same basket as maybe, Ben Nevis or something like that. It's these old Mortlacs and things. I'm not suggesting that all the flavor profiles are the same, but in terms of people chasing it down, kind of one of these if you know type spirits of the past. I remember people speaking about Scapa in hushed tones when I first got into whiskey. And the only thing that was available then, with any kind of regularity or chance of getting hold of it, was the old distillery labels Gordon MacPhail releases. So it's something that's very, very loved. And she's saying, good to see you, Roy. Got some good news for you too. Good news for me. I always like a wee bit of good news. Top Terpist saying he's bought me a nice dram. He's saying seen Aberfeld at 18, now fully natural for $89 US. Okay, now we're excited, right? Which 18 is that? Not the standard core range though, is it? Top Terpist saying for $89 US, an example of positive move towards integrity and affordability. Listen, Aberfeldy is ripe for this. Oh, such gorgeous malt, misrepresented at 40% ABV. That would be amazing. Haven't pulled the trigger yet, but just might in order to support those efforts. If I was to see, so the equivalent for me, Aberfeld at 18, fully natural for $89, that seems impossible to me. So if we convert that to pounds, we're in the realms of 68, 70, 72 pounds, something like that for an 18-year-old. I don't know where in the world you're, okay, I do, because you bought me a dram, so you're in the States, buddy. That's a no-brainer. At £89, fully natural, 18-year-old Aberfeldy. Either it's an error or a buy a case. Thank you for the dram, fella. Cheers. Jimmy's saying, good news, Aquavita West Whisky now declared to be the very best thing on earth. That's old news, is it not? It's good news, but it's old. Top Terp saying, I think it's a Sangiovese cask. Okay, that's interesting, yes. That's why I was asking if it's core range, because they did the wine series releases. Now, that's not to put anyone. Sangiovese's red wine for me, it can work on some things. Aberfeldy's, I think, is too soft for me. The wine cask finishes and maturations that I tried from Aberfeldy didn't excite me. That said, $89 is, it just sounds a wee bit amazing. Anyway, there's lots to talk about tonight. I need to get a wee move on. I'm up early tomorrow. Probably a lot of you guys are too. So I need to hammer home something that's happening as well. As we're pushing forward into these, you can see that this whiskey is, this presentation, especially at 48% ABV, this beautiful custom bottle, all of that stuff, you can see that this is not what you would call stack 'em high, sell 'em cheap supermarket whiskey. There's been a bit of care put into this. There's a little bit of a premium look and feel about it. Not just in terms of how it looks and you can hold it in your hands and things like that, but if you look a bit deeper and look at the label information, 48% ABV, okay, you're in the realms of something a bit more meaty, a bit more value forward. That was not often the case. Premium was not necessarily something that was giving you something more. Premium was often conflated with exclusive, limited, short on supply, even if it was contrived, short on supply, short on availability. And of course, the prime example would be the Speyside that is the Macallan. The definite article has to be there. It's not just Macallan, it's the Macallan, right? Now, I've had this bottle out before. My friend Keith, who I mentioned, is just back from Orkney visiting the distilleries. This is actually his bottle. I should have had it back to him by now, but, you know, I don't know. Anytime he has been round, we've kind of forgot to do the bottle exchange. I'm going to take some dust off the shoulders for him here. This has been on the vPub before, but it bears repeating because I was given the option to look at some premium examples to kind of hold up the bottles and say, look at how these things have changed a little bit. Now, I know that there's a lot of them that are refusing, remaining stubborn and things like that. You can include Dalmore in that. You can include lots of other kind of more very specific market-facing products that the prices are remaining stubbornly high, despite the fact that they're not moving much stock, because optics mean a lot, especially if it's acting as a halo product. Macallan have taken a slightly different strategy, and I say that from a few, and this is just my observation, so this isn't me speaking to the people behind the scenes or anything like that. This is just me. Always what I do on the vPub is me speaking as a punter and talking from the perspective of a customer, right? You go into any spirits retailer now, spirit specialist, you're going to suddenly see Macallan on the shelf. That didn't used to be the case. Whether it was because of availability, whether it was because of focus, whether it was because of strategy, policy, whatever it was, it certainly was not a desire for a lot of the retailers that I was speaking to. They were not particularly interested on trying to sell a £90 12-year-old. Well, that £90 Macallan 12-year-old is softened in price, and it's suddenly starting to appear everywhere as well. So it's interesting. But what we've also started to see is a softening of the strategy from Macallan. Like I say, this has appeared before, but I cannot deny that this whiskey that pours from this bottle, it's only 12 years old. It's almost as good as the Aquavitae Decadent Drinks. I was just about to say the brand. Secret Speyside hidden malt, virtual malt, marketing malt, the collaboration that we put out at Christmas time. But this is now a 100 degrees proof, American proof, or 110 proof, sorry. So 55% ABV. Macallan for £125. It's one of those that was originally released through the Whisky Shop as an exclusive again, but suddenly this is available everywhere. It's available everywhere at this price. This seems to be the Macallan that we can have today. Now, why would you spend £125 on a 12-year-old whiskey? Even if it's cask strength, yeah, you would have to be mad. If you knew your whiskey, you would probably take your money and buy 2 bottles of Signatory Vintage, or you would go out and treat yourself to £125 of something that's much more expensive. More on that a little bit later in this very, very vPub tonight. However, if you know your whiskey a little less and you need the reassurance of a brand, Macallan is probably going to have quite a draw. And there was a time that was out of reach. There was a time that you could not buy it, and now you can. Even the mighty Macallan has had to try and navigate significantly changing dynamics in whiskey without coming away looking like they're wearing egg on their face. I don't have much to say about that. I don't have much to talk about optics or anything right now. All I can talk about is the whiskey that's in the glass. And this is unquestionably marvelous whiskey. The problem remains, you can still get this quality of whiskey for much, much cheaper elsewhere. But what has changed is the difference in price between what you pay for this and the cheaper whiskies is much, much less. Much less. Coffee, espresso, cocoa on the nose. As I go into the palate, lots of red, dark red fruit. A decadence, a richness, a dryness, a spice, a tartness. Quite complex. There's lots of things happening to the point that it's going to be a 2 or 3 sips, sitting down with a pencil or a pen to kind of make note of all of these things. But there's no doubt, there's no way you're going to pour this for anybody who knows whiskey and loves whiskey, and certainly loves sherry matured whiskey, who's going to sip this and say, that's boring, that's dull, that's poor, that's lesser, that's anything. Everyone's entitled to their opinion, but I think we do get to a point where all good whiskies can be objectively appreciated as being such. And I think this absolutely achieves that. Once more, I'm going to rewind you back to 2021, where no one could buy a Macallan 18 very easily. We were fighting over all the releases that came out. You might remember the hilarity that came out, and even before the pandemic, with all the special releases, and Macallan getting all the press about traffic jams at their distillery and things. These are all contrived things that happened. These were very deliberate acts from a very cynical whiskey producer that has had to change the way it looks at the market, it looks at the world, the way it releases products. Some of the products that are out there, some of the products are pretty poor. You might remember a vPub a few months back where I opened a Macallan Night on Earth. I think it was the first light edition, and that was fairly generic whiskey. This is much closer to what we understand Macallan to be and what it can be. Just a wee hint, I struck match there on the nose. Not in a bad way. I'm not suggesting that there's sulfur or whatever in this, but there was a lovely, imagine what cordite might nose like. Something like that. Chocolate, dark, bitter chocolate. Some kind of raspberry fondant. I'm drawn to talking, saying raspberry fondant. I really want to say a ruffle bar, but there's hardly anyone in here that knows what a ruffle bar actually is. But it's raspberry fondant coated in plain dark chocolate, I think. Lovely, objectively lovely whiskey. But we are not talking about something that's suddenly exclusive and sold out and gone and it's on the secondary market now, because the secondary market's gone as well. We're talking about something that's still in the primary market, still at the same price. We're talking about cask strength, sherry matured, Macallan, at a price that's affordable for mortals. That didn't used to exist. Danny Hevington is saying it was the one that came in its own trolley case with a picture and a bloody cocktail glasses, and the daft paid $4,000 for a cocktail whiskey. I thought it was the Genesis. Was it not Genesis that caused all the hoo-ha? I don't know if that was what it was. Whiskey, he's saying it's old school Macallan. I have a single cask in my glass, and it's one of the best sherried whiskies I tasted, so they can make it if they want. Let's always remember that we know that that's got a 12-year age statement on the packaging, so we know it's made at the old Macallan. So the Macallan that we fell in love with, if we ever did fall in love with Macallan, it was made at that old. The new distillery, I think, might be making every bit as good whiskey as the old distillery ever did, but it's still, in my eyes, got to prove itself. And I've got nothing that I know from the new distillery. 2017, 2018, that started, right? So that can only be 8 or 9 years old at best. Can you believe Roy's drinking a Macallan that doesn't have our faces on the bottle? What a cop-out. Thanks, Ben. Brian Stormont, good to see you, Brian. How you keep, buddy? He said, I know a ruffle bar. What a ruffle bar is. Fab tasting note. Yeah, it's funny how you kind of rely on brands and very colloquial things rather than just being able to talk about raspberry fondant. But it was specific to, I think ruffle bars are raspberry fondant, but I think there may be coconut in there as well. Maybe I'm just making that up. I'm suddenly craving a ruffle bar. I don't even know if they exist anymore. Google it. They were fantastic. I loved them. So where do we go from Macallan? So we talk about, a correction from, let's be honest, when Macallan was good, as already been mentioned, when Macallan was good, it was very good. It was appreciably, objectively good. And they made their reputation based on having very, very good whiskey, and they built that up over the years. And there was a time in the 70s, the 60s, the 80s even, that it was almost like if you knew, you knew. Macallan was like maybe a Springbank type cult whiskey, that kind of lots of kudos around it, and they built a brand on the back of that. But they got a bit carried away with themselves. They got drunk on their own stuff, and it became just a mess. Just became very ugly for me. And nobody in my community, nobody in my realms of whiskey ever spent much time talking about Macallan. It's just the way it was. So I think it's interesting that we now find ourselves in a position that there's something that's affordable and that's there. However, what they have to back it up with, it can't be like the Night on Earth, can't be like the Harmony series. It has to be something that is actually something you can taste and say, okay, I don't feel bad that I spent that money. The quality of the liquid has to be good. And if what I'm saying about the market getting better, if what I'm saying about whiskey coming back to us is true, then what should be happening is the whiskey that we're trying should be better quality drinking experience than it was a few years ago as well. Why should that be the case? Because if there's less demand, there's more whiskey available, there's more stock. Deeper stock means things are maturing for longer. There's a wider selection in order to choose from when you're putting together or developing a new product, when you're making a new product, when you're releasing a new thing, or when you're releasing your core range, whatever it may be, and you've got deeper stock to choose from. Let's imagine it's a 12-year-old. Suddenly, it's not only barrels and barrels and barrels of 12 as soon as they turn 12 that you're bottling to sate the demand. Suddenly you're going, okay, we've got all the 12 in the vat in here. It could do with a bit of oomph, a bit of depth, a bit of richness. Let's pick that 14-year-old sherry cask in there. Let's pick a couple of these 14-year-old bourbon casks or whatever to lift it. And I don't know what's happening behind the scenes, but you can imagine that must be part of the remit. You can imagine that they must be trying to make sure that they can quash the competition, that they can stand up and say this is a delicious whiskey and confidently demonstrate it to be so. But I need to prove to you that that's the case. Now, there's a number of whiskies I could have reached for. I could have reached for a number of whiskies within my perma shelf. Go back and look at that vPub if you haven't seen it from a few weeks ago, where I decided these were the 10 whiskies for the perma shelf. And I think that these are objectively solid whiskies today, and arguably in one or two cases, every bit as good, if not better, than they've ever been. But occasionally you'll have a wee chitty chat and somebody will say, this is very good and here's the reasons why. And you'll go and you'll buy yourself a bottle and you'll say, wow, this is amazing. The future is bright. Whiskey's coming back to us, not just because it's affordable and available, but because the quality is coming back to us too. So if I was to speak to you now about the quality of liquid, I'm going to just go with it. I'm just going to go with something that I've never tasted, but I have confidence in, and the hope that it's a demonstration of that. If it is not, I'll state it as such. There's no skin in the game for me. I bought this bottle with my own money. There's a number of bottles I could have picked, as I suggested to you, even going into the perma shelf that I brought to you recently. But this is one that I decided to go based on somebody who I trust suggested this bottle. This is from Tomatin. This is a Bòcan. Now this is their Creations number 8. Listen, you have the standard Bòcan core range that we may or may not be familiar with. Sometimes I think as a community, it's one of those ones that's easy to forget. However, I'm quite a fan, and over on the shelf over there, I've got a number of Bòcan releases over the years. Why is that? They tend to be non-age statement. So that's kind of a negative for me. However, they do have this kind of always curious appeal. Number one, it's not lightly peated or peated Tomatin. It's made in a different way. The whole regime is very, very different. The end product is different. So we're not just sipping Tomatin here. Bòcan is almost like a hark back to a lost Highland style, maybe. You know, that kind of peated Highland style. And what they like to do with the Creation series is just go a bit crazy, a bit maverick, a bit wild. And I have to say, my experience with Bòcan over the years, it has been up and down. Not all of them have hit well, but the majority have done very well. One of my favorite ever Bòcans was that 15-year-old full maturation in sherry that did have an age statement. There have been other age statements out there. There's been the 12-year-old Andean Oak. Was it Andean Oak, the green label one? But I'm talking about the signature. Most of the Creations, they tended to be non-age statement, as this one is. Oh, quite a silent wee cork pop. Can we do it any better? There we go. Okay, we'll get a clean glass, neck pour. Because this whiskey was recommended to me and I purchased it, and I was very happy to purchase it, and I'll tell you why that is in a second. This is fully natural whiskey, by the way. There's no ambiguity here. It tells us that it's non-chill filtered natural colour, 46% ABV. There is a non-age statement on this, but the gossip and chatter about this whiskey, despite the fact that there's no age statement on it, is that this is very, very mature whiskey that's in this. When I say very, very mature, I'm only going on anecdotes and gossip and chitty chat, but they're talking about it being minimum in the teens, comfortably in the teens. My goodness, that's a great nose, lovely nose. I just wasn't consciously nosing that whatsoever. It was just muscle memory there. Immediately I'm struck by melon flesh, white melon flesh. I need to not get distracted. I need to talk about what I'm talking about. Melon flesh, maybe cantaloupe, Gallia, slightly more aromatic melon rather than the kind of fresh white melon. Oh, it nose is nice. I'm not going to let it smoke, but I don't think anyone will be surprised about that. No, it's there. There's a warmth, a hearth, wood fire smoke, maybe that type of thing. But what's distracting me is ripe fruit. Slightly, I don't want to say sour, that's not the right word. And I don't want to say mulchy or funky, those aren't the right words either. But it's maybe like an overripe fruit. There's something objectively interesting about the nose on this. Anyway, I need to talk to you about the whiskey. I'm getting distracted. Because this Creations number 8 should actually be potentially kryptonite for me because it's from wine casks. But for me, my struggle with wine casks tends to be when it's red wine. And these wine casks are different, and I've got much better experiences with white wine casks and dessert wine and those types of things. But here we've got ice wine casks. Now, the provenance of these ice wine casks, are they German, are they Canadian? I have no idea. It just says ice wine casks. And it's telling us what kind of character we should maybe pick up from that. And it's got also Verdejo casks. Verdejo casks, from what I can gather, is a Spanish wine that's really quite crisp. It's kind of similar to a Pinot Grigio, maybe a Sauvignon Blanc, that type of thing. So those kind of maybe wines, those dry, sharp, acidic, quite piercing wines that you might enjoy alongside a seafood or something like that. From what I understand, having consumed quite a bit of Spanish wine in my time, I've never happened across Verdejo casks. I'll try and correct that the next time I'm in Spain. Ice wine, I'm a wee bit more familiar with because I've been gifted some ice wine very, very recently, and it was absolutely gorgeous stuff. But that's what's been used to make this specific outturn of Creations number 8. I don't think it's a particularly big outturn. But what's interesting to me is we're talking about a 45 pounds bottle of whiskey here. So despite the fact I've told you that it's from quite exclusive, kind of obscure casks in order to make this, it's fully natural, lightly peated Highland, all of those great things, despite the fact I've explained to you that the chatter is that this is made from really quite mature whiskey. Tracks on the nose, it really does. This, you can pick it up at retail, recommended retail, same price as the other Bòcan creation releases of recent times, £45. I have to be honest, it's got a very, very seductive nose. It's a very good nose. There's just bags and bags of sweet fruit, but there's not a sickly edge to the nose. So we've not got just loads and loads of sweet caramel, toffee, brown sugar, that types of things. The sweetness here is coming with a ripeness. There is a wee edge. It's not sour, but it's maybe acidic. Maybe that's the best word. There's an acidic edge to the nose. That's exactly, I'm much more comfortable with that. and it's mouth-watering. It makes me want to dive in. So, here's to the next Bòcan. I've just come off a sherried Macallan at 55%. It's much softer. There's good mouthfeel here still. It's juicy. There's something here that those elusive things where it was on the nose and it's certainly there on the palate. It just kind of flashes, and it's so hard to. There's an edge here, and I can't for the life of me place what it is, but it's somehow familiar. It is an acidity. I think it's an acidity. It's like a spike. It brings a really interesting sip. It brings a really interesting layer that elevates it above just another nice bottle of whiskey. In terms of age, in terms of profile, in terms of maturity here, I think it's sipping like a very well put together 10, 12, 14-year-old easily. And if there's older stocks involved in this, then it tracks. There's nothing here with an edge or anything. It's quite elegant. It's well poised. It's on the brighter side of things, the slightly sharper side of things. There's sweetness here, but it's not sickly sweet. That's a charming little bottle of whiskey. There's a nice mouthfeel too. There's a chew to it. I picked this up at Good Spirits Company today, £45. £45, no age statement. You could say that's. However, if there's truth that the stocks out there are becoming deeper, the selections are becoming more appealing, it tracks that there are suddenly bottles available that can take advantage of that. What I do wish we could get our head around a wee bit more is if this is genuinely something that's made with older stocks, wouldn't it be wonderful to talk about that? Wouldn't it be wonderful to have that discussion? Wouldn't it be interesting? And I know that is a complex discussion to have in itself, not just about legislation and things, but just about how the optics go. What if they want to bring out something that's really fantastic and delicious and vibrant, and it relies heavily on some 6-year-old stock and stuff like that? I know it can be a difficult discussion, especially if they're on the shelf side by side each other at the same price. But I think we're past that now. I think we understand things much, much more these days. I'm realizing that I'm missing a lot of chitty chat, and I'm missing a lot of drams that's coming in. But Whiskey with Molly Ben is celebrating with being a member for 56 months, saying 4 years and 8 months of putting up with Jimmy Legg. You're best of pals. You're actually in love, aren't you, both of you? It's terrific to have you both here. Thanks for supporting me, Ben. Thank you, buddy. I have a bottle for you. I think you know. Seaweed World Cherry saying May 31st, celebrating 47 years of marriedness with my favourite guy, 53 years together and still having fun. Well, that's terrific, Sherry. And I'll raise a wee glass to that. 53 years together and 47 married. Cheers to you both. Happy anniversary when it goes. 31st, when is that going to be then? Sunday. That'll be I have a lock-in scheduled with supporters for Sunday. Happy anniversary, Sherry. Cheers. Jimmy's bought me a dram to say the value of Macallan has skyrocketed since Angie's image appeared on a bottle of it. You're welcome, Macallan. Well, we don't know if that's true, do we, Jimmy? But the virtual malt, we'll stick to that. Glenn Duncan is saying, Aquaviti, last day of work. My next dram will be in sunny Scotland with friends. How terrific is that, Glenn? Here's to happy travels And here's to you getting back to Scotland, buddy, with friends. Thank you for your dram, Glenn. Thank you so much for your generosity. Cheers, fella. I'm getting through this, and it's not just because you've bought me drams. There's a dryness on this. There is an acidity there, especially on the finish. And I find it Moorish. I find it compelling. I find it interesting. I find it my type of thing. It's weird that it's how comfortable I am with white wine casks, dessert wine, you know, Madeiras, things like that. I know Madeiras fortified is a bit different, but red wine is always a try before you buy with me. Robin Clark's bought me a dram as well to say, just in the house and tuned in. Thanks for the drams on Saturday at the Bon. Darth Kermit and Miss Darth Kermit, appreciated. Hey, Robin, it was brilliant to see you there, buddy. Nice to see you hanging out with us all, and it was nice to meet both of you there in the chaos of the last night of the Bon. And Danny Keenan, my pal Danny, celebrating being a member for 40 months and saying 40 months with the best community. Cheers all. Thank you very much, Danny. Nice to have you here, buddy. Well, I think you all know that this tonight was inspired by another bottle that might be a similar hue to this, a similar lilac-y purple hue. Because it became a bit of a joke on the channel, as every new year predictions I would come in, I would say, hey, this is the year that they're going to bring back this whiskey. They're going to bring it back. They're going to bring it back. They're going to bring it back. And every year we were waiting. And I think it was directly down to the thing that we've just been talking about, and that is depths of stock. I think the reason that we never had this product back, that in their core range, age-stated core range, they had a 10, and the next place that you were going to get a core range with an age statement on it from this producer was 18 years old, and they had nothing in between. Whereas in the past, they did. And one of them was my favourite of the range, and it disappeared. And I think it was my favourite for a number of reasons. I think it was down to flavour and enjoyment and just the fact that I loved the whiskey. But also it was one of those whiskies that taught me how a delicate balance of light cask influence could really elevate a whiskey. We're talking about an age statement of 14 years. They weren't always completely transparent about the makeup, but we believe it to be a mix of distillery wood. Let's say that's refill European oak, refill American oak, ex-bourbon, ex-sherry, all mixed together. There was a flush of fresh bourbon in there as well. But what it actually put together, what it gave us the sense of, was that refill Scotch whisky experience. And it's hard to find that in whisky, generally speaking. Glencadam do a very good job of it. I think their peak of that would maybe be their 15-year-old as an example. But generally, we tend to find the modern whiskey thing is cask. It's always about the cask. And especially if we're looking for natural colour, the more cask influence, the deeper the colour gets, the easier the whiskey is to sell, that type of thing. So there's a huge swathe of people that really love those pale whiskies, those restrained whiskies, those whiskies that have come from refill hoggies and second fill, third fill, potentially ex-bourbon barrels and things like that. Because if it's come from there, you need to get it into the teenage years in order for it to start to settle and sing. And that's what this whiskey was for me. Of course, I'm talking about Arran's 14-year-old. Arran transitioned in my mind from being one of these to avoid new distilleries with rough and ready, peppery spirit. I'm going way back to the start of my whiskey journey 20 years ago, by the way. When I got my head around the 14, this is what made me fall in love with Arran as a brand. So I'm going to pour, this is a 750ml bottle because this is a gift from my pal, Arran Rao. Thank you very much, Arran, from San Francisco. It means that I've got the luxury of being able to pour a wee nip of this. Actually, the last Arran 14 I had was also a gift. Phil and Deepa also bought me an Arran 14. And this is the new version. And I think it's quite sweet that they've actually kept the colour the same. So you can see that, you know, despite the new branding and things like that from the old branding, the tones, hues, and colour is the same. But what that suggests then is they've basically brought back, and I say the word with a small L, they've basically brought back the legend, right? Have they? Aye. Well, we'll wait and see, because there is a wee departure here, but it's a departure that I'm excited about more than apprehensive of. We can talk about that in a second. How many years in the vPub have I been talking about the resurrection of Arran's 14? A mid-tier age statement, right? Now, where do we look elsewhere for how much should a 14-year-old cost? Well, if we look at the Keen-to-Ruban from Glenmorangie, we're about 70 quid for that, aren't we? 68 quid or whatever. Am I speaking out of turn? Let's check that, actually. Keen-to-Ruban. Oh, no, it's much cheaper. Lower ABV. It's quite a big, large-scale outturn. Maybe a closer comparison would be Tomatin's 14-year-old. A Portwood Tomatin's 14. It's 46% ABV though. Same ABV as this 14-year-old, 46. But that's 78 quid RRP. You can get it a bit cheaper. Shop around a bit and you'll get it cheaper than that. I'm going to put these in different glasses. The Roundel Aquavitae logo with a roundel on it there. Will it focus? It will try. Yeah, that's the old one. And the one with the banner logo on it here, I'm going to it's going to try and focus on my face here, right? Maybe it's going to, there we go. I'm going to pour it in that so I can keep track. Famously from these Arran bottles, the round shoulders means they don't glug. Stealth pours from these bottles. But here we have it. What a celebration. Finally, 2026. It's only taken them 8 years since discontinuation to bring it back to us. Does it tell us any details on the label? Mature and bottled in Scotland. It's got some Braille on here, unless it's written in Braille. Non-chill filtered natural colour. Thank you so much. Some map coordinates. 14 years old. Distilled and matured in Lochranza, Isle of Arran. A sweet island character, fragrant and fruity, with notes of vanilla and pears. Well, they tell us, if we do a wee bit of digging, it doesn't tell us on the packaging at all, but we do a wee bit of digging and follow the chatter and the gossip online, the chitty chat, which tends to be pretty accurate. They tell us that this is bourbon finished in Palo Cortado. Those of you that have been watching the channel long enough, they know that how much of a fan I am of Arran 14, but you also know how much a fan I am of Palo Cortado cask. Palo Cortado is a very distinctive sherry style. It's not something that's designed or made on purpose. When the floor dies away, the character of the whiskey ultimately changes in the way they mark the cask with a chalk mark. It's either a chalk mark, so it's Palo. If they score it out, it's cut, so Palo Cortado, and that's what it is. This is actually quite a rare style of sherry, and for me, it has a really, in my experience, positive impact on Scotch whiskey. Anyway, let's remind ourselves about the original Arran 14. Bright orchard, green apple, little bit of sherbet confectionery, powdered sugar confectionery, like Refreshers is the confectionery. I'm back in the kind of colloquial thing again, Refreshers. Kind of custard, patisserie, flair. Right in the middle of the map. Have a wee sip. Soft. Like I say, center of the map. Elegant. Almost, it's silly to say flawless. Flawless doesn't necessarily suggest a perfect whiskey. What I mean about this when I say flawless is that they're just like, how can you say anything bad about this? It's just very, very good, clean whiskey, especially if you like this style. Nicely balanced, poised, perfect for me. If you've been watching me for long enough, my age statement is always going to be 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 years. That's peak Scotch whiskey for me. Teenage years. Despite the fact it's 46%, obviously there's dilution here. There's a lovely mouthfeel here. I've just reminded myself how much I like this whiskey. It's not going to drag you in any direction. It's just going to focus you on here and what this is now. So now, after 8 years of waiting, we have to let this breathe for a second before I dive in. Aquaviti, 6 years a member, you superstar. Thank you so much. Gavs Ramsey's in here hanging out with us tonight. He sent a wee sticker along and a dram as well to celebrate supporting me for 6 years. Love you, Gav. You're a superstar. I hope you're keeping well, man. I hope to see you soon. Thank you. Danny Hebington has sent 10 Aquaviti gift memberships out so that 10 of you on the generosity of Danny have picked up a wee membership from me. I hope you stay and hang around a wee while. Bit of salty Swiss rope on the standard Ardna tonight. Oh, nice. What's the standard Ardna? But are you talking about Ardna Ho or Ardna Murchen? I would suggest you're on the AD, maybe getting a wee bit of salty Swiss rope. Don't know what makes the rope Swiss. Dorpass Whiskey Tim is saying, oh yes, hope to see the new Arran 14 here in the US soon. Christian Jensen is saying, I'm trying the Arran 14 right now. Skal, fantastic. Is it the new one or the old one, Christian? Whiskey Weekend Drama is saying, don't mind the cost. I want this bottle. Well, the cost is actually, let's say they've gotten away with it, because the Tomatin 14, as I've mentioned, is 78 RRP. You can get it cheaper. You can get it below 70. The Arran has come out everywhere at somewhere in the ballpark of 68 to 69 pounds. So I think for a 14-year-old whiskey, I think that's fair. It's fully natural. And I think, yeah, they've pitched it about right, I would say. Whiskey Weekend Drum Harrow's saying, oh, sorry, I've just picked you up, buddy. Dan is saying, Quinta Ruban's more like 45 euros, 50 max. I think you're absolutely spot on. You're right. Tomatin's 15, 65 euros, so about 55 pounds. Look at the 14 port cask. You probably buy that cheaper online elsewhere as well. I'm looking at their website. If I go Tomatin 14 port, the prices I'm getting here, it ranges from, okay, there's quite a big discount there at 56 quid at one site. 55, 55, 55, 55. Oh, that's right. And there's lots of cheap prices out there for it. 55 quid. So it's a wee bit cheaper than that. If you go direct to the Tomatin website, I think they're suggesting that it's £78 on their website. Can't imagine they're selling much from there. But the Tomatin Portwood has been uninterrupted supply for about 15 years, I would suggest. Happy the colour is not dark. I have to say the colour is exactly where you would expect it to be. I think if it's any darker than the old one, it's by a very, very tiny amount. Never got to try the old one, so fingers crossed, says John, Judge of Genius. Forever hanging out anywhere close together, remind me, John, and I'll bring you along a wee sample. Scott Thorris saying the recent Glenallachie 11 Palo Cortado release wasn't to my taste, so unsure about this one. It's interesting. Maybe Palo Cortado could be one of those kind of Marmite things. I've had very good experience with it so far. Here's to another 75 months. Slancha says, Alistair Gray. Thank you, Alistair. Thank you so much. Greenamalt James is celebrating 74 months, saying very happy to see Arran 14 back, as am I. As coastal as Switzerland. Sound familiar? Okay, that coastal country of Switzerland. Plenty of water around though. Christian is saying it's the new one. Never tried the old one. I might actually be the one from Arran I like the best. Fantastic. Good feedback immediately. And Jesper is saying compare that to Lagavulin, bringing it a 14-year-old Fashio bottle for £240. Absolutely bonkers. Nowhere near worth that. That I am devastated to hear. When I saw the 14-year-old, this is the first time I'm hearing the price of it. That's devastating. £240. We can't let stuff like this succeed. We can't. We can't. It's just, anyway, I don't want to, we're trying to stay positive. The nose is different on the new one. Not massive departure. Also have to caveat, of course, this is a neck port and this one has been open for a wee while. There's a salt and a spritz and a freshness. There's a vibrance to this. They're actually very, very similar though. The more you do that, you kind of have to kind of reset your nose between each glass. Yeah, orchard. There's something here. This is nice. Like a blanket of warmth. You could go in a sugary direction, go patisserie type, but you could also maybe be in a cinnamon nutmeg vibe. There's also a wee like a warmth to it. It's kind of ochre color, a darker, warmer. So this has got like a fizz effervescence, and this has got like brighter, greener, whiter fruit. But I'm desperate to try a wee sip. I'm going to have a sip of the old one first. A charmer of a whiskey, much in the same way that you might find it easy and difficult to recommend something like a Glencadam 10. It depends on the person you're recommending it to and what they like, but this would be an easy thing to recommend to somebody who likes that clean, easy, poised, balanced, subtle whiskey. This has got an edge. This is still subtle, but there's something on top. Here goes. Okay. Job done. Right. Just relax. The Arran 14 is great. Everyone needs it. Just don't worry. It's a good job. In many ways, okay, let's build. I think what I've just tasted is, if there is Palo Cortado in the mix here, it's been used with such a soft touch that I suspect the majority of, there are people that are much better at nosing and tasting whiskey than I am. They might be able to pick something up. But for me, if I was sipping this, I don't think I would be drawn in the direction of Palo Cortado. So we can sleep soundly that the Palo Cortado thing is maybe a differentiator and a new recipe that is not going to rely on anyone having a memory of the old whiskey. This is a new product, a nod to the past, but this is what it's going to be going forward. And I suggest, is my little thing that I brought up earlier, talking about the little banner that said this is about the ability to bring this now because of depths of stocks. But they also need to have enough of those Palo Cortado casks to do this, whether it's maturation or finishing. And they've done a good job. This is a better whiskey by some margin than Arran 10 for me. And I know that there's so many of you just love Arran 10, but Arran 10 is so intensely caramel and toffee and fudge and kind of those first fill bourbon cask, first fill bourbon. There's a nicer, slightly more balanced, poised. There has to be more refill in this. Maybe it feels like that. It feels easier. It feels cleaner. It feels purer. Let's go back to the old one now. Excellent. White fruit, cleaner, sweet apple, excellent. The new one does much of the same, but there's an edge. There's an earthy, ochre, richer, some kind of tone that we have to put at the feet of the fact that there's Palo Cortado involved. So the gossip is, I've not actually read that myself. I should have checked. So excited to pick this up. I went into Good Spirits Company in Glasgow today purely to pick this up. And the topic for the vPub this week has been inspired by the release of this whiskey. Since that was discontinued in 2018, I've been patiently waiting for the re-release of Arran's, in my mind, Arran's Anchor. That's what we have. I'm going to go one further. I'm going to suggest that it's my favourite whiskey that I've sipped this evening. Not by much, not by a huge margin, but by a very subtle, let's not say margin, by a very subtle differentiator. And there's something that I've been talking about on the vPub from its very beginning, and that the concept of a whiskey that's moreish. And that's what that is. And that's what I remember the old Arran 14 to be also. The job's done. I don't know who's responsible for it. I don't know who came up with the idea of the Palo Cortado thing. But it's all just... It doesn't matter. What's in the glass is what matters. It's a good job. We've got Arran 14 back again. It's fully natural. It's available in a decent outturn. It should be getting to you wherever you are. If you are able to access Arran, the 10-year-old, the quarter cask, whatever it may be, you should be able to eventually get Arran's 14-year-old too. And I hope you do. And I hope that when it arrives with you, it arrives at a price where you feel comfortable to pick it up. Because I think this kind of whiskey doesn't always exist easily outside of Scotland. But even inside Scotland, there's not many folk confident enough to put out a subtle, pretty whiskey like that. And that's exactly what it is. Fantastic. So relieved. I am positively embarrassed for Lagavulin, says Jimmy Legg. He's talking about that 240 quid Fischio release for a 14-year-old. And I bet you it's not even. I bet you it's a pretty huge outturn as well. Tim is saying, the Arran license to distill 12-year-old McTaggart Palo Cortado finish special release. I did not like in any way, so I'm a bit scared about this one. I wouldn't be too nervous about the Palo Cortado thing. I don't think it's certainly not very obvious to me. I think it's very softly, very subtly done. Daisy is in. Good to see you. Evening, you lovely people. Aquavitian and Barflies. The Arran is seriously challenging my bottle ban. There should be plenty of it around, Daisy. There really should be. It should be out there for a while. Falscraft is saying, is the variation much more than a batch variation? I have to say, I'll be honest with you there, Klaus. No. I would say that to me, it's right well within the tolerance for batch variation of Arran 14. I hope that makes some sense. And I know that these bottles are likely to be 8 years or so apart, but It just is. Jimmy Legg is saying, is there a neck pour involved, or is that there's a neck pour involved? Obviously, there's always a neck pour involved. I'm always amazed at how the neck pour, rather than being something that dissipates and becomes something of just folklore that we believed once upon a time, it actually doubles down more and more and more. I think the more that you get into whiskey, the more that you detect either a tightness and a closed offness with a neck pour, or you get a really quite vibrant expressiveness, like almost like a effervescence and a fizz from a neck pour, and afterwards the whiskey can soften. You never know which way it's going to go. So much of it is down to the organic component, and the whole thing, and that's us. But there is absolutely something about the first dram from a bottle and subsequent drams. And I think we should embrace it and just enjoy the fact that it changes. Chalpin is in saying, one day I'll know how to pronounce your name. And how is this in terms of sweetness? Unfortunately, I find the 10 too sweet, and I wish that I had it more refill instead of so much first fill. I think the 14 will be more up your street, as I've touched upon that heavy kind of brown sugar caramel toffee thing in the 10-year-old. I also find it a wee bit sweet. I think you will enjoy this. Whisky Weekend Drama saying, time to sleep. Great to watch you opening Arran 14 and slant you. Thank you, Harrow. I hope you join us on the replay, because I'm going to open something that is arguably more affordable and arguably more dreamy that we can enjoy it these days. Ginger Genius John is saying, for you, the new Arran 14 or the Arran Barley? Oh, that's a tough one. Arran Barley was superb. And it was 50% ABV as well, going from memory. I've got a bottle of it up there. Price is good. Oh, John, you've given me a quandary there. Do you know, I'm going to go with Arran 14 now, because I'm in the... so let's imagine a scenario where we close the vPub, turn the lights off, and I go into another wee room and I sit with two glasses, and I'm going to, compare. One of the glasses is definitely going to be the Arran 14 tonight. So maybe it's just because of novelty. The Arran Barley is a peach. Justin is saying, time to pull the parachute for me. Catch the rest on replay. You're over there in Hong Kong, buddy. It's wonderful to have had you in tonight. Thanks for hanging out with us again. Get your sleep. It's a work day tomorrow, fella. Jimmy Like saying, I absolutely agree with you on your neck pour analysis. That hurts to type. Listen, it doesn't need to be like that for everyone, but if we stay open-minded to the fact that it can change, that's all we need. We can remain true to our kind of, always taste the same. If that's what we believe, fantastic. But if we keep our mind open to the possibility that it can happen, that's surely sufficient. Anyway, I've got one clean glass left and one more point to make, as we are 1 hour and 48 minutes in to this vPub this evening. We've talked about price competitiveness. We've talked about the premiumization and the softening of that as a concept. At one point, I remember reading a Diageo, share statement talking about how they'd moved beyond super premiumization to uber premiumization. It's just farcical to think that that's the way that they were going, and they were going about it in a very bombastic, proud way. And it's just like, now we're seeing their products, especially the special releases, so heavily discounted. The majority of Diageo products across the board, and a lot of people give me a hard time for being so anti-Diageo. It's not true. I'm not anti-Diageo. I'm certainly not anti-Diageo whiskey or distilleries, but I am anti-Diageo policies. They just seem bizarre. They're unhinged to me. They really are. And I know it's tiresome for you to hear, and I apologize for that, but thank you. I just find it difficult to get my head around some of the decisions that they make. Anyway, I think that the discounts that we've seen has proven the lack of success of some of their directives. It's silly. When people aren't drinking it anymore, and then they're waiting until... It's like the supermarkets that always has that bottle of wine at £15, but you never pay £15 for it, because you know that once every 6 weeks it goes on offer at £9. So you know it's a £9 bottle of whiskey, bottle of wine, sorry. So you never pay £15 for it. Diageo is starting to teach us that that's their products. So they're going to bring out the special releases. They're going to put those prices on it. We're all just going to say nah, and we're going to wait until it's half price and we can pick it up in the discount basket. It's silly. I think it's clumsy, and I think it's not the way to handle Scotch whisky generally. So we talked about premiumisation and how it's blown up in their face, and we also talked about the quality of liquid and how the alleviation of demand and how the deeper stocks can actually help raise the quality as demand drops. We talked about the depths of those stocks and how it's helped us realize things like Arran 14 finally coming back on the scene. But now I want to talk about how we all end up in a point in our whiskey journey that we really want to try some of that gold, that magic, that thing that's transcended, 10, 12 years. It's gone into teenage years, it's upper teenage years, and it's maybe gone into 20 plus years old. But during the pandemic, anything with an 18, 19, 20, 21, 22 plus year age statement became ridiculously unaffordable. Hundreds of pounds. And if it was a whiskey that we were chasing, if it was one of these obscure whiskies, one of these kudos-laden whiskies, one of these, we knew that it wasn't for us. So we just disconnected from it. Well, I was in Good Spirits Company today, and for 100 sterlings, a wee bit more, just over 100, I think, 100 and could have been 110 from memory, I was able to pick up a bottle. And it's the Good Spirits Company tissue noise that you have to deal with now. So it's the whole ASMR of it all. I was able to pick up. And, over recent times, there's been a lot of this around. There's been Thompson Brothers Bunnahavens. There's been Bowmores from Cadenheads. There's been lots of examples of 20-plus-year-old liquids that are remarkably affordable. I don't think this is diluted. I think this at 44.9% ABV. I think this is absolutely cask strength. It doesn't mention cask strength on it there. Does it say? There's some verbiage on the side of the label, but it doesn't mention anything about that. I'm going to hold up this Living Souls 22-year-old Balmenach from Good Spirits Company. Now, coincidentally, this was released on Dramface on Monday of this week. It was Archie Dunlop, I think, was the author behind the piece. And he was very, very happy with this bottle. But he scored it, the scores on Dramface can seem a bit miserly at times. He scored it a 7 out of 10. But I felt his words, it could have been easy, and I think he even mentioned in it, could have been easy for him to extend that to a 7.5 or an 8 even, with a wee bit of encouragement. Just the way that he was effusive about the whiskey, and that's why I encourage everyone to not just look at the scores on Dramface, and please read for context and everything else. That's where the writer will share with you what they actually love. So we have here, this is a 22 years in a first fill barrel, but it's dropped to 44.9% ABV. I believe that there's still a strong chance that's cask strength. So what we have there is a wee bit like a concept that I didn't touch upon with the ice wine for that Bòcan. Ice wine is made from letting the grapes freeze, so that when they squeeze those grapes, the water stays frozen, so that the wine, the liquid that they're getting out is super concentrated, this kind of gloopy wine, rather than all the water is still remains ice. What we've got here in a cask that's dropped down to 44.9% ABV, the water has evaporated. The ABV has evaporated. This is Scotch in a cool Scotch climate that we're talking about here. And what we have is something that's much, much more kind of concentrated on flavour. We're not talking about something that's had added water at the point of bottling. Like I say, I'm not 100% sure that that's the case here, but when we have that low ABV and its natural cask strength, it can be really quite dreamy. So if we talk about whiskey coming back to us, we can suddenly pick up 22-year-old Balmenach. Okay, 22 years old. From a distillery that hardly anything is released from. You know, Balmenach is one of those kind of almost like Scapa, some of the other distilleries that just you never see anything from. Balmenach is very, very rare to see anything from. There's no official bottling of Balmenach. You can do a tour of Balmenach, but what you're actually doing there is a gin tour. It's just one of these things, the Worm Tub Distillery as well, that exists purely for blends. The nose is floral, immediately floral, outdoors. There's a little bit of a kind of nice kind of, it's the floral thing that's leading me there. It's the outdoor things. But there's a kind of laundry detergent thing here, and that's not to suggest it's soapy or anything. I'm talking about those artificial, wonderfully welcoming and comforting kind of floral, potpourri type bouquets that you get from such things, fabric softeners and things like that. This is an outdoor nose. Soft fruit, white soft fruit, maybe leaning a wee bit into tropical. Yeah. Ripe, white, lychees. Kiwi. Kiwi's a bit green, maybe sweet, overripe kiwi would go there. Floral again. Some white wax. So I've not reached for my water dropper all night, but immediately the nose on this makes me want to. I'm going to sip it neat first. Even at 44.9% ABV, I'd love to see what a wee drop or two does to this glass. But it's so, see, this is £100 bottle of whiskey, 22 years old. 5 years ago, when we looked at that trajectory, the way that things were going, there's no way we could have dreamt of this being the case. Cheers, everyone. Oh, wow. Much softer, much more elegant, much lighter. This needs immediately obvious. This is going to need, it's going to need a bit of time. It's going to need a bit of patience. But there is a concentrated aspect to this. So we should never look at the ABV and just immediately write it off. We need to know the context. So if the ABV is low, 40, 43, whatever, obviously we're looking at something that's been bottled for a specific purpose to make it profitable and cheap and palatable and mass market and all of that. What we've got here is a very, very small outturn, low ABV, 44.9%, but a completely different proposition. And it does not sip in any way the same, I would argue, when something is concentrated naturally to 44.9 versus something that's been diluted to 44.9. It's two completely different things. This noses and tastes immediately like something that is naturally at this ABV. This is a level up to everything that we've been sipping tonight. I say we, apologies, it's just me. You know where I'm coming from. All of these things are great, solid, good whiskies. We've again, another vPub where we've sipped nothing but good whiskey. But this levels up a little bit. This demands a little bit more of your time. This is going to demand there's a wee bit of a butteriness there. This demands a wee bit more of your patience and attention. I've now got another bottle that I'm going to pour another dram off after the vPub closes tonight, I think. So just let's wrap our head around this, because we can now, and this is not just Balmenach, this is starting to happen with, like I mentioned already, Cadenhead's just recently brought out a Bowmore, 20-year-old Bowmore for £120. We're living in times where we are actively witnessing old, sometimes legendary, sought after, special whiskies that are suddenly being made available to us in a way that we could never have expected, we would never have predicted. And yet somehow this is available. If you want to pick up a bottle of this now, I picked up the last bottle from the Good Spirits Company, so that they're now sold out, I know. But this is still available online. I checked, and you can buy it from between £100 and £110 everywhere online. I think you have to be UK centric. Some of you might be lucky enough to get independent bottlers supplying you where you are, maybe Living Souls, who are doing just fantastic stuff. But this is almost, it's almost taken us back to 2014. Okay, how much are we going to have to pay for a 22-year-old Balmenach? And okay, maybe not 2014, but 2016, 2017 prices, a decade ago prices is where we're at today. That's where we are. I can't think of a better example of how whiskey is coming back to us than that we're able to get these lovely, aged, delicate, beautiful, precise, indulgent, happy to be alive whiskies that we can buy. Now you're going to say, Roy, wait a minute, I'm not paying £100 on a bottle of whiskey. I'm not paying £110 on a bottle of whiskey. What are you talking about? You're talking out your backside. I'm going to go straight back and buy the stuff that you were recommending at the start, and that's fine, and I'd encourage you to do that, and please go ahead and buy a bottle of the Scapa at 40 quid. Buy a bottle of the Bòcan at 45, the Glen Scotia 12 at 45. Pick up at yourself, treat yourself to a bottle of Springback 10 on secondary, which is also softening. It's £60, and indulge yourself and fill your boots and have the best of times, and it's wonderful. But appreciate that you've probably bought 2 or 3, because you bought that Springback 10, you bought that Bòcan, and you bought that Scapa. Maybe you bought the new Arran 14 as well. So you're already well over £200. We talked about balance, we talked about consumption, and all of these wonderful concepts that's easy to talk about and much harder to put into practice. How about you don't? And maybe you treat yourself once a year to a triple figure bottle of whiskey and understand what Scotch whiskey tastes like when it's been left in peace in a bourbon cask for 22 years. Deliberately take twice the time. I'm pouring another because I need to try a wee bit of water in it. See, taking 5 or 6 days away has been brilliant. 5 days away. So I'm just going to put in, I'll try and make it so that you can see. Don't know what it's focusing on. A couple of drops. Get that reaction in the glass. It's just so floral. This nose is so fresh, clean. It's like fresh linen. It's just a gorgeously inviting springtime aroma. maybe brings out a pop of acidity or sharpness, but it also gives you a sense that you have added a wee bit of water. I think if you were too generous with the water on this one, I think it would maybe fall apart a wee bit. I think at 44.9, I think it's pretty perfect, just the way it was sipping. I love whiskey. I really do. And I love this style of whiskey. There has been a theme tonight, the exception being that Macallan. Everything else has been this really quite subtle, poised, balanced, lovely, difficult to articulate product that are somehow they're completely different to taste, but especially when it comes to vocabulary and the ability to convey how different they taste, can leave people like me wanting a wee bit, but just wonderful, wonderful stuff. Klitz is saying, I picked up that bottle as well, 125 euro, and was blown away. Probably my favourite bottle of the year. Klitz, you must be talking about the Balmenach. Kyle Taylor is saying, Balmenach, one of the only worm tub and dunnage operations left. Love it. Definition of a hidden gem. Like I say, it was always one of those kind of chased if you know type distilleries. Klitz is saying, I also found the taste notes on the bottle spot on. Great job on those by Living Souls. Let's have a wee nose on what they're saying, tasting notes. The nose drifts between crisp white grapes and the soft floral sweetness of Parma violets. Absolutely give them that. In the background, the faint scent of Brasso lingers. Oh, wow. Brasso's metal polish. Like stepping into a time-worn tool shed beside the vines. The palate is bright, carrying notes of melon, lemon peel, and stone fruits before easing into a long floral finish. We certainly agree on that lovely, lovely, lovely floral outdoor clean linen aspect. Beautiful whiskey. The Dramface review should have been an 8. All writers are permitted their own ability to score as they like. Treated myself yesterday aquavitae to a Thompson Brothers 27-year-old Glengarry, £190. Easily the most expensive bottle I've bought, but thought it was a great price. Not got it yet though, so we'll see. Scott, please come back and let us know how you got on with that. But a 27-year-old Geary, 27 years old, so you're late 90s. So it's post when they got rid of their so it's going to be an unpeated Glengarry. But 27 years old, I suspect you're going to have a good time with that, Scott. I'd be really interested to see how you got on with it. Brian Stormer is saying, love Living Souls. My wee whiskey club got their 48-year-old Carsbridge on sale for £190. We can't wait to enjoy it at our next tasting. Again, love to hear the feedback there, Brian. Jimmy Legg, I take 6 days away every week. Do you only have a sip with us on a Thursday night, Jimmy? You're a good egg. Adrian Hanna, good to see Adrian. He's saying that 30-year-old Rochedeau from Bedford Park, 30-year-old Loch Lomond for £175 is a great example. That was also, Adrian, a Dramface review very recently as well, that 30-year-old Rochedeau from Bedford Park. Hey, we're starting to see a couple of Rochedeaus appear as well. It's funny how these things appear in kind of little clutches coming out at the same time. But again, I think that if we were sipping Rochedeau, old Rochedeau at 5 or 9 or 12 years old, we might have been not complimentary about it. But now that we're in the realms of 27, 30, 32, 33, 34-year-old Rochedeaus, it's just been left in peace to work out what it's going to be. And you know, as I'm sure we're all here for it. Talking about being here for it, I don't know what I need to do in order to convince anybody that whiskey is coming back other than accept the fact that I have no new messaging. I have nothing new to share with you. Everything I've said tonight, with very few exceptions, you already know. You're aware. You know how much it is to buy these whiskies. You know what's available most often. You might not have been aware of what was available back in 2021. You might not be aware of what was available at what price back in 2016. But we've been doing this since 2017 now, this vPub thing. And we've been measuring it, and we're watching the wax and wane and the ebb and flow of whiskey. And I think that we can all suffer from recency bias. We can all forget about the challenges that we've been through. You know, the worry, the F5 key on the keypad, trying to get that bottle that we really wanted in the crazy times, and the taking it for granted before the crazy times descended upon us. So I think it all it's incumbent upon us all to be mindful in the moment of why we're here, what we're doing, how much of it we're doing, but also to recognize how privileged and special a space it is. Because right now, we are literally in love with this liquid at a time that it's getting better, getting more available, and getting a little bit more affordable as well. And the people that don't choose to follow those routes, the Diageo's 14-year-old Lagavulin for Fischel at £240, we need to send a message to them. And the best way to send a message to them, because there's no face there at all, there's no face with Diageo at all, there's no interaction, there's nothing. It's vacuous. The best way to send a message is to continue to not participate. And I know that that's tough to ask because we love the distilleries that they manage and own and run. We love Lagavulin. We absolutely love it. Colilla on Isla. We love Benrinnes and Dilluan and Inchgour. And we love Kleinleash and we love Mortlach and we love Glenord and we love... Diageo owned 30 malt distilleries in the Scotch whisky landscape, which was pretty much, depending on how many distilleries you subscribe to, we believe there to be 150 distilleries. So they own one in, what does that work out as? 5? 1 in 5 distilleries is then a Diageo distillery. But on scale, it is much, 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 much bigger than that. If they want to play in single malt, if they still want to be part of the single malt landscape, we need to send the message back to them that they're making wonderful malt, but they're getting the bottling and the presentation and the positioning very wrong. It's 2026. The choice that we have available to us today is unheard of. How many of you are willing to stay for a wee quiz at the end? Because I'm about to slink off to bed with one of the lovely, lovely drams that I've poured tonight and shared with you all. But if you're up for a wee quiz at the end, I have 10 questions. And typically, they will start off accessible and fairly easy. And we'll get more and more tricky towards the end until we finish on a deliberately obtuse, horrible asshat question. But the quiz at the end is designed to help us enjoy whiskey a wee bit more, learn a wee bit about whiskey, kind of pique our curiosity, that type of thing, point out things. But also, you can benefit from the fact that you're in here live tonight, potentially following along with the community, what they're answering and things like that. And if you're not, if you're just playing it honestly and straight against yourself, the pass mark is 5. And if you don't make it, hang around a bit. I guarantee you in the future, you will. Christian is saying, just tried the Balmenach 22. It really is something. I'm afraid a sample won't be enough, Christian, as long as you can get hold of it at a reasonable price. Andrew's saying the quiz is the reason I jump on early. Falscraft is saying, hey, once I'm back, I'm also back for the quiz. Good to see you, buddy. It's good to have you here playing along as well. I'm heading off. Do reach out. Roy says, Amy, you're not staying for the quiz, Amy. Donner Pass Whisky is saying bottles from 15 to 20 years ago are coming up in auction for reasonable prices. Got Old Pulteney 21 for half the price of the current 25, and many think it's better than the 25. Listen, Tim, tonight, the last time we talked about whiskey, coming back to this, I spent a little bit of time talking about secondary prices are softening. But if you look at, take Springbank as an example. If you look at the 12-year-old cask strength, if you're buying that on auction, you're going to pay from 120 to 160 pounds, which is still a wee bit too much, but that's because it's a very limited, small outturn, once or twice a year type deal. If you look at Springbank 10, which to me is get close to peak Springbank, right? It's just gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous liquid. You're picking that up for £60 at auction. Okay, there's fees and shipping and things like that, but we're talking about a handful of pounds at best, more than retail. If you really want that liquid, it's not that far out of reach. And it's getting to the point that the pricing should start to be feeding back to the distilleries how much headroom they've got to charge anymore. I think it would be a dangerous game to continue price creep right now. And I hope that many distilleries are not doing that. Anyway, who's ready for the wee quiz at the end? I am. I'm looking forward to sharing 10 questions with you. Remember, it's always optional. It's always down to you guys to just enjoy yourselves. Thank you very much for joining me tonight. If you're leaving, and if you are leaving, please don't forget to leave a wee thumbs up to let people know that this is my best attempt at legitimate whiskey content. Cheers. Okie doke. Wow, the end of May already. It'll be June before we know it. Next week will be June, actually. Good luck, everyone. Question 1. This year, we'll see the first West Highland Whisky Festival held. Ardnamurchan's open day will be Friday, the 19th of June. But I'm asking you, who else will host open days as part of this collaborative event? A. It'll also be hosted by Oban, or B. also Tobermory, or C. also Nicnean. There's a number of distilleries coming together to put together the West Highland Whisky Festival, one of these concepts that you hope grows in the future. There's space for it all. Ardnamurchan is going to host its open day on Friday the 19th, but I want to know who else will host open days as part of this event. A. Diageo's Oban. B. CVH Spirits, ex-Distell, ex-Burn Stewart's Tobermory on Mull, or C. Nicnean. Nicnean's an independent distillery. To get to Nicnean from Ardnamurchan is either a catapult, a short trip by catapult or trebuchet, or it's a very, very long drive around Loch Sunart. I know there's a wee boat that maybe goes over, I'm not sure. Oban's also on the mainland, a wee bit further south, but which of these three distilleries fit? ABC, ABC, ABC. Lots and lots and lots of you are saying ABC. Ben Whiskey with Molly's just saying all. Some of you are being a bit more precise. Nobody needs to worry. Jimmy Legacy and Trebuchet is the coolest way to fly. You'll probably black out before you left it though, right, Jimmy? Spot on to all of you who suggested it was all of them. It's fantastic to see CVH Spirits, Diageo, Nicnean, obviously independently owned, all collaborating together with Ardnamurchan to bring this in June. I hope it works very, very well. I hope it's a good functional festival for everyone. If you're in Scotland during those dates, go to the individual websites, go to the Ardnamurchan website, Oban, Tobermory, Nicnean. I hope we're all covering it as well in order to figure out a wee bit more. Question 2. Frustratingly for many, which of these stalwarts of whiskey did not appear in the 2026 Permashelf list that I shared a few weeks ago? The list that's just over my shoulder here, it's going to be really hard for you to see right now. Which of these stalwarts did not appear? Mentioned it tonight. A. Glencadam's 10-year-old. B. Arran's 10-year-old. C. Legic, Tobermory's 10-year-old. Glencadam 10, Arran 10, Legic 10. Whisky with Molly saying, oh, sorry, Ben, just as it jumped. I think you're having a chitty chat with Ben, Jimmy anyway. Andrew Dorr is still in playing along. Sugar Kitty is here. Fantastic to see you, Jeff. How you keeping? Kyle Taylor celebrating. Everybody's got a 1 out of 1, of course. It's an easy tonight. Everybody gets it. Ted Brooks is suggesting this is a Blee, suggesting it was Arran 10. Paul Gidley, good to see you, Paul. He's also in saying it's B. Fairnight Walker saying B. Kyle Taylor is also suggesting that it's B. You can't go wrong with B for the price, says Trevor Edge. Lechic 10 did make my permashelf. So did Glencadam 10. But of course, as you've all spotted, absolutely Arran 10, much to the protest of many of you that sent messages to suggest I'd made a blunder there. Listen, everyone knows about Arran's 10. Question 3. Which of these brands' core lineup features a 14-year-old matured in a tawny port cask? I'm going to give you 3 distilleries. Just tell me which core range 14-year-old has a tawny port cask maturation. A. Tomatin. B. Glenmurray. C. Glencadam. Tim is saying he's lost count of how many Arran 10 bottles he's had. Mike Melissa is saying if Glencadam gets kicked off the perma shelf list, I'll be super excited by whatever replaces it. It's a wonderful way to think, Mike. It's appreciated as well. Highland Hamish is answering and giving us a wee pronunciation lesson as well. That's appreciated, Hamish. Lachlan is saying A, going with the flow. Absolutely, it's A. Glenmurray has had port releases, as has Glencadam. I think for the most part, both have been non-age stated releases, but Tomatin, for a long time now, has as mentioned this evening, the 14-year-old tawny port. Question 4. On a visit to Glenmorangie, you might notice the colour orange is everywhere. Why might this be? Why is that the case? Why has Glenmorangie got orange on its signage, highlights, everything? If there's an opportunity to make something a colour, they choose orange. Why is that the case? A, because it's inspired by an animal. B, is to assist the pronunciation of the brand. Or C, is because of a local wildflower. Why is Glenmorangie orange? Inspiration from an animal, to assist pronunciation, or is it down to a local wildflower? Indiana Jones wears orange. Yeah, I didn't even want to mention the whole Harrison Ford thing, but it's a thing. D, Harrison Ford. Maybe Harrison Ford's wearing a lot more orange now. D, for the Dutch Royal House. Wow. Okay. I'm going to give it a second. And despite so many of you answering live in the chat, Okay. This is a really, really, really interesting one. Scott Thor is suggesting sectarianism. No. Really, really not. Okay, there's orange everywhere because of 2 reasons out of this. There's nothing to do with the wildflower, so we can immediately delete C. But A and B are both correct on this occasion. Ben Whisky with Molly has Talked about orangey as in the flavor profile, some orange citrus and things in there as well. Fine. That's often kind of anecdotally mentioned. I have to say B is a pure anecdote as well. They talk about to assist pronunciation because if Glenmorangie is orangey, that stops you saying it's Glenmorangie because it's never about Angie and it's always about orangey. So it's Glenmorangie is the proper pronunciation. So the orange thing fits. But that came after the fact that they took inspiration from the fact that their stills are the tallest in Scotland and often referred to as the giraffes. And that is where they take their color palette from, their branding. However, anecdotally, even brand ambassadors will mention that it's often a really good thing to remind you how to pronounce it. It's orangey, the label is orange. So either A and B is correct, nothing to do with a wildflower. But there you go. Jimmy Legg is absolutely spot on. It's always about Angie. Unless Angie is orange and it's whiskey. Whiskey with Molly saying it's always about Angie. Brilliant. I keep forgetting there's an Angie, right? So there you go. A or B is correct as we move into the picture question. Just a straightforward picture of a distillery. And I'm not going to ask you what we're looking at. I'm going to instead ask you where we are. Are we A in the lowlands, B in the Northern Highlands, or C in Speyside? Where is that image? I'll go back to let you see it. A, lowlands, B, Northern Highlands, C, Speyside. Where is this distillery? I think there might be some attrition tonight. Dan DVDW is saying it needs a new whitewash. I suspect this is one of those distilleries that has never been whitewashed. Come on. Where did the ABC go? It disappeared. Apologies, Ben. There you go. I'll bring it back up again. I was just letting people see the picture. A, lowlands, B, Northern Highlands, or C, Speyside. I'm going to put you out your misery. All of you now. We are actually looking at Balmenach Distillery. Balmenach is, of course, in the lowlands. Well done. Well navigated for the majority of you. A few banana skins slipped up there. Bit of asshattery going on, but we were looking at Balmenach there. Question 6. Glasgow has just recently released the third batches in their core range cask strength series. This is cask strength versions of their core range liquid, of course. But which of their core range does not receive this cask strength treatment? What does not? What is exempt from these releases? Is it A, the original does not get a cask strength? B, the triple distilled does not get a cask strength? Or C, peated does not get a cask strength? Which of those does not have a cask strength release? Gene Kelly is suggesting that he was knocked out early. We've also got some points dropped, surprisingly, by Trippleberg, Paul Gids, Gus PW. I wonder which Gus that actually is. I don't know if that's the Gus that I know, but Gus is on a 4 as well. A 4 for Daisy and Danny. I've also slipped up. Lachlan McKenzie on a 4. Donner Pass Whiskey on a 4. Scott Thor on a 4. But lots of you on a 5. Kyle Taylor, Ian Bruce, Randy Rice, Brian Cabales, Jesper Bach, Tony Nelson, Alan Smith. Good to see you, Alan. Good to see you, Tony. Bruce Bernard is in as well on a 5. Fantastic. Dan's on a 5. Thanking Ben. Ben Damon Hunter's on a 5. All good. All good. Everybody swinging in here for what's pretty easy question 6. Should be a wee bit tougher than that. I can tell you the original has a cast strength version. It's just come out. It's 61%, I think it was. The peated has just come out as 60% cast strength releases. Excellent value for money as well. But unfortunately, triple distilled is the one that does not receive so far, up until now, a cast strength release. I think Glasgow's got plenty selection to be getting on with right now. Question 7. Which of these statements are true about Bruichladdich Distillery? I'm going to give you 3 statements about Bruichladdich. Only one of them is true. It is unique in utilising the last operational open-top cask iron. That should read cast iron. Apologies. That's probably not autocorrect. That's probably my fat fingers. Open top cast iron mash tun, B, belt driven mill, or C, Lomond still. What is unique about Bruichladdich Distillery? It is unique in the utilisation of the last operational open top cast iron mash tun, belt driven mill, or Lomond still. Tricky one this evening. Oh dear. Open top cast iron mash tuns, belt driven mills, or Lomond stills. Okay, looks like we have a very, very interesting question, if nothing else. I can tell you open top cast iron mash tuns exist elsewhere. Deanston is an example. They have an open top cast iron mash tun. Belt driven mills, very, very rare to see a belt driven mill. Lomond stills, very, very rare to see a Lomond still. But I can tell you that there are Lomond stills operational in Scotland elsewhere. In fact, there's one making gin near Loch Lomond, but the most famous one in the whisky context is the ever so slightly modified Lomond still at Scapa. Bruichladdich has the only belt-driven mill not only left operational in Scotland, but believed to be the only belt-driven mill making any scale of distillation on the planet. Bruichladdich genuinely one of these, a bit like Springbank, a bit like, I suppose, Glenturret once was, one of these kind of operational museums. If you ever take a tour of Bruichladdich, spend a little bit of time looking at the condition of the mill and it's how it's set up, how it's configured, and how it can even still work. It's quite incredible. Question 8. Blair Athol and Dufton were the first 2 distilleries bought to service blended Scotch whisky. Once upon a time, Bell's was the biggest seller in the UK. Bell's decanters, Bell's was synonymous with whisky. It was everywhere, especially in Scotland. Blair Athol and Dufton were the first 2 purchases to support that blend. Which was the third? Tricky, hellish question, actually. A, Inchgower, B, Pittyveich, or C, Glentochers? Well, it's obviously in Speyside. We have to think a little bit about ownership of companies and how they passed hands over the years. Jimmy Like is suggesting that I'm going to be belt driven the next time he sees me. Oh dear, there's been a lot of attrition. But Adrian Hanna Sugar Kitty Jeff, Brian Cabales, managing to hold on to a 7 out of 7. Well done. Some people falling out in the chat tonight, mostly with me. That looks like it might be a new name. Stuart Dalgleish is in suggesting that it's A. Nice to have you, Stuart. If it isn't the first time I've welcomed you, it's nice to have you here. Graham Young is going for A as well as Christian. Whereas Bruce is going for C. Jerry Legg is going for B. And Dan DVW is going for A as well. Lachlan McKenzie, A. Tribleberg, A. Goose is going for A. Lots of Danny is complaining, bring back Menno. It's kind of funny how these quizzes come together. Sometimes they're trickier than other times. But I think this is still interesting, especially the fact that Pity Veich is in the lineup. Pity Veich was absolutely part of the Bell's portfolio at once upon a time. It was actually built by Bell's to service the Bell's blend. Eventually it was bought over by DCL before they became Diageo and closed. But the one I was looking for was Inchgauer, one of these kind of synonymous with Bell's distilleries. I hoped that you would get it through a 50-50 there by eliminating Glentochers, because that's a Ballantine's product. So it left you with Inchgauer or Pity Veich. It ended up being a 50-50. Apologies if you slipped up on that one as well, but nonetheless interesting to my simple mind, perhaps. Stuart Dalgleish is going for a 4.5 out of 8. You need a half point from either of the last two questions, Stuart, to get your pass mark. Good luck, buddy. Question 9. At 21,000 litres of capacity, which of these distilleries houses the largest distillation pot still in Scotland? When I talk about litres of capacity, I'm talking about litres of capacity of the pot still. It's the largest pot still in Scotland. Which distillery does it live at? A. Glenturret, B. Tomatin, or C. Glenkinchie? Let's go with Molly, St. Aquaviti. Does Kilchoman not have a belt-driven mill? Okay, now I have to think about Kilchoman. Do they have a Bobby mill or a Porteous mill? I can't even imagine the Kilchoman mill room right now. I can't. However, Ben, if Kilchoman does have... Anyway, it was quite interesting, the thing I read. I think it was in the Charlie MacLean book that I was reading it. He talked about it not just being the last belt-driven mill in Scotch, but the last belt-driven mill in existence or something. But if I do get something like that wrong, it means it trashes the question for me and everyone gets a freebie on it. So if you can prove that Kilchoman is a belt-driven mill, it's everyone's, right? But we're looking at the largest. This is just a very, very long-winded way of saying who has the largest pot still in Scotch whisky production. This one, you have not slipped on quite as much as the last one. There is some people going for B, some people going for C. I can tell you that the 21,000 litre capacity wash still is at Glenkinchie. Troubleberg is saying, I remember Bells from the Michael Moorcock's novel. Main character was a major fan of that blend. Then we move into the asshat at the end. Who is still hanging it together? Daisy's on an 8, along with Randy. Gene Kelly on a 7, Tony Nelson on a 6 tonight, Adrian on a 7, Scott on a 6, Danny Hebden on a 7. What Ben is saying, Kilchoman have a Porteous mill driven by leather belts. Ben, you know the rules. If that's a belt-driven mill at Kilchoman, everyone gets a point for that one. Anyone that got it wrong can take it, regardless of what they answered. That's the rules. If I make a mess, everybody gets a freebie. I don't have anything more comprehensive on hand other than the Malt Whisky Yearbook, and I don't think it'll mention anything about that. Not the 2026 edition. It doesn't mention anything, Ben. So take it, my friend. You know the deal that we have. The Falsgraf is saying, in what vessel did you do the vPub at Tomatin? I did it at Tomatin. It was in the mash tun. Christian Jensen is saying the internet thinks that Kilchoman has a belt-driven mill. Oh, so there's more consensus for Ben. Fernick Walker is saying Glenkinchie also has a wash still of 30,000 plus litres. Oh my goodness, there's a bigger still now at Glenkinchie. I'm taking 9 out of 9, says Ben. You superstar. Jesper is also saying 9 out of 9. Okay, 8 out of 9. Now 7 out of 9, says Dornfast Whiskey. Everybody's benefiting out of Jeff. This is the brilliant thing. This is the brilliant thing about how this is always ever going to be a bi-directional thing. I put a quiz together and I get called out on it. If I get it wrong, it's if this was TV, if this was a pre-recorded video, if this was anything other than this, it couldn't happen. I'm trying to put a positive spin on the fact that, in fact, the only way I can the best way I can put a positive spin on it is the fact that Ben has just stood his ground and claimed a point, and it's a deserved point as well. If Kilchoman's mill is belt-driven, everyone gets a point regardless of what they answered on that question. Well done, Ben. All right, here's the asshat at the end. I'm trying to remember how much asshattery is going on at the end. Is there any 9 out of 9s tonight? Jesper, Ben, of course. It's going to be a hard-fought one or two. Okay, good luck, everybody, for the deliberate obtuseness of this question. Of the approximately 1,300 malt washbacks in operation in Scotland, how many as a percentage are still made of wood instead of steel? So we know that washbacks, it's down to distillery, they either have wooden washbacks or steel washbacks. And some, like Ben Nevis or Ardnamurchan, a few have a mix of both. But we want to know what percentage are wood as opposed to steel. Around the same as the number of A, phenols measured by ppm levels in Bowmore malt. Around the same as B, percentage ABV in the Ardnamurchan core range. Or is it around the same as C, years of closure of Glengyle last century? So Glengyle in the 20th century was closed for a number of years. How many years was that? Does it match up to the percentage of the 1,300 washbacks that are still made of wood? Or is it that the percentage of ABV in the Ardnamurchan core range match up quite nicely to the number of wooden washbacks that exist in Scotland for malt production? Or is it A? No, in fact, it's the phenol level measured by ppm in the Bowmore malt that matches the percentage of washbacks that are made of wood in Scotland. There's about 40 different things going on in this question. And Ben is quite rightly saying, come on, Roy, he's going for B, percentage. Menno lives, says Gene Kelly. I think it was, did the week away do some damage to me? Gene Kelly saying I'll still not be getting a 10 out of 10. The way this is going, I'll get 11 out of 10, says Bruce Bernard. Just take it. Mike is going with C just because it's Glengyle. Ben is sticking to B for well, I can help you a little bit. I can give you some numbers. I can tell you that The phenol levels in Bowmore is typically between 20 and 30, so that suggests that 20 to 30% of the 1300 malt washbacks in Scotland are made of wood. Or if it's B, the Ardnahoe core ranges put out at 50% ABV, which suggests that 50% of the 1300 washbacks are made of wood. Or is it finally years of closure of Glengyle last century? They closed in 1925. Yes, it opened in 2004, but it's 75 years of closure in the last century, which means that would mean that 75% of the fermentation vessels in Scotland are made of wood still. Whiskey with Molly's resolute. He's saying definitely B, perhaps. Jimmy Legs bought me a wee dram. Thank you, Jimmy, saying I recall liking you but more before hearing this question. And you bought me a dram to say so. Thank you, buddy. It means a lot. Listen, I think there's nothing to worry about. Andrew's saying, thanks, Roy, for another great vPub to your health and happiness. It's very nice of you, Andrew. Thank you very much for the late dram. I'll raise this wee glass to you, Andrew, and to my pal Jimmy's health. Thank you for your participation right till the end. And I can tell you all that Ben is absolutely correct. 50%, just a smidge over, 51% of all the fermentation vessels, all the washbacks in Scotland are still made of wood today, even today. Jimmy Legacy, and I protest, I'm not answering. Wonderful. I've just gone back to that Arran 14, even after that Balmenach 2022, and it's very, very delicious. I'm very happy with it. It's been a long time coming. Became a bit of an in-joke on the channel that every year I was going to predict it. Arran 14 came back. I think this year I deliberately decided I was not going to predict it, which of course meant that inevitably that was the year that it appeared. I'm very glad that it has done. I would like to see it maybe £4 or £5 cheaper, but I'm quite happy that it's here and tasting as good as it does. Thanks to everyone for participating. How many of you managed a 10 out of 10 tonight? Let's see. A 9 out of 10 for Christian. A 9 out of 10 for Daisy. Fantastic. Great scoring. Tony Nelson on a 7. 8 out of 10 for Adrian. 8 out of 10 for Scott Thor. Superb. 7 out of 10. Good enough for Tim Dorpass Whiskey. Also for Danny and Lachlan McKenzie. Randy Rice. 10 out of 10 given the gimme. Fantastic, Randy. Congratulations. Ian Bruce is on a 9 out of 10. Jesper is on a 10. Fantastic, Jesper. Sugar Kitty also on a 10. Well done, Jeff. Amazing stuff. Graham Young on a 10 out of 10 as well. Superb. Lots of 10 out of 10 suddenly appearing. Ben Demon Hunter, first 10 out of 10 in quite a while. Cheers, everyone. Listen, it wasn't that tough a quiz after all, was it? Ben is saying, I've WhatsApped you the Kilhoman Mill. Terrific stuff. So not only are you claiming it, you're giving me evidence for the claim as well. Thank you, buddy. DVD Dan is saying, how many of those wooden washbacks are made of Oregon pine? It's another question. It's a brilliant question, right? Could be larch, could be lots of other things. Could be oak. You sold me the Macallan 110 proof, ordered it for $100 total with discount code. Listen, for $100. I don't think you can complain too much about that. I mean, it's still saltier than most, but it's a good whiskey. It's a really good whiskey. Adrian is saying, cheers, Roy and Barflies, for another lovely evening. Thank you, Adrian. It's nice to have you here, as always, buddy. Mike is saying there's an alternate universe where I got a 10. Unfortunately, not this one. The good news is, Mike, you can come back in the future and recover, no problem whatsoever. Daisy's saying, thanks for another great vPub, Roy. Good night, everyone. See you Sunday. Thank you very much, Daisy. There's a lock-in on this Sunday evening. It's just going to be a very, very relaxed event, just me kind of hanging out with everyone and having a bit of quiet time, a bit of downtime. Scott Thor is saying, cheers, Aquavita. Much appreciated as always. Good night, all. Thank you very much, Scott. Nice to hang out with you tonight. Gino is saying, thanks for a great vPub, Roy. Have a great weekend. Gino and Graham Young, both pals of each other and pals of mine. I'm glad to say both in here hanging out tonight. Thanks, Roy Aquavitian, folks, says Lachlan. Thank you so much, buddy. And Jimmy, generous Jimmy, sending out 10 Aquaviti gift memberships at the end of tonight. Thank you so much, Jimmy. It's very generous to everyone that picks up a membership. I hope you'll consider staying for a while and say thank you to Jimmy. Jesper is saying, Aquaviti, cheers for a great vPub. Good night, all. Thank you all so much. I'll be back next week to kick off June for another month set of vPubs. But of course, as been mentioned, I'll be here on Sunday evening for a quiet, no theme. There will be a quiz at the end. Maybe not a theme on Sunday night. We don't know, but I'll be here for a wee quiet kind of relaxed look under the hood and let everyone how I'm feeling, the mood of everything, events, bottles, all of that stuff, whatever's appropriate to catch up on. Until then, I'll thank you all for hanging out with me for another enjoyable wee Thursday night. It means a lot to me. I need it. I enjoy it. I even missed it a wee bit last week and was looking forward to tonight more than I imagined. Thank you all for your support. Thank you for your participation. And I look forward to hanging out with you again next week. Until then, I'll raise this glass to remind you all that you're very dearly loved. And until then, best of health, literally, Slanchava. Cheers.